Welcome along to a very special 9 till noon show. I suppose here in Brussels it's the 10 to 1 show because we are an hour ahead here. We're live from the EU Parliament in Brussels and we're going to be discussing all things EU, how the Parliament work, what's it do, what's its future like. And maybe you've got some questions in relation to that. As I say, we have a whole host of guests coming up over the next 3 hours. The usual numbers apply: 086 60 25,000, WhatsApp or text that number 086 60 25,000. You can give us a call on 07491 25,000, 07491 25,000, or email comments at highlandradio.com. And if you wish to watch the show, you can watch us live here from Radio Studio 2, I believe it is, here in Brussels, by going to our socials, YouTube, Highland Radio Ireland, or across our Facebook pages, and also on our website, highlandradio.com. Right, let's have a look at the papers. We're doing this a little bit different this morning, so hopefully it works okay. We'll start with news that Justice Minister Simon Harris has said plans to overhaul Ireland's defamation laws will stop if it acting as a rich man's law. Under the proposed new laws, juries would be abolished from High Court defamation cases. There's also a provision to allow a plaintiff or defendant to lodge an offer of settlement, which will be taken into account in defamation costs. That is an area that still needs looking at. The Irish Daily Mail this morning: the Defence Forces barely tolerates women members. A damning new review into allegations of bullying, abuse and harassment in the military is found. The report uncovered a litany of criminal and deviant behaviour that women in the army were subjected to over 4 decades, which Taoiseach and Defence Minister Micheál Martin said left him with a degree of disgust. Now, regular listeners to the show would know we've talked about women who have been in the army and have subjected to this type of experience, and it is unpleasant, and it's welcomed to hear that it's being acknowledged now, but we just have to see what happens going forward. The review, conducted by an independent panel of experts, found that the Defence Forces barely tolerates women, and it's worst verbally, physically, sexually and psychologically abusing women in its ranks. Okay, so that is the Irish Daily Mail this morning. Let's see what else is making the front pages. Excuse me. At 8:57 a.m. on Monday, Audrey Elizabeth Hale sent a friend a disturbing farewell message, issuing a dark warning that something bad is about to happen. This is the story of a chilling farewell message a killer sent to friend minutes before shooting spree. This is the awful story from the United States. Minutes later, the 28-year-old transgender ex-pupil embarked on a bloody gun rampage at a Christian elementary school for children as young as 3 in Nashville, Tennessee. Chilling CCTV footage shows the heavily armed shooter in camouflage trousers and a tactical vest blasting through a locked door at the convent school before stalking the corridors. And can you allow yourself to imagine what those young students must have been going through in that awful moment? But unfortunately, and we were talking about this yesterday evening, it's hard to get your head around that it happens so regularly, and it really, really does. And it's such a polarising topic in the United States. Still, they seem no further to a solution that might see children not being gunned down in a place where they should be incredibly safe. Housing, of course, continues to dominate the headlines. Running scared over Dáil eviction ban vote is another headline. The government is expected to win another 2 votes in the evictions ban tonight, but there were angry scenes. Well, I think it's later this morning, actually, at least one of them. But there were angry scenes in the Dáil yesterday when the first motion on the contentious issue was debated after Sinn Féin introduced a motion calling for the ban to be extended. The main opposition party was denied the chance of a vote on their proposal when the government introduced a counter-move known as reasoned amendment, which stops the vote on the main issue going ahead. Last night, Sinn Féin's housing spokesperson Owen O'Brien accused the government of running scared by attempting to suppress tonight's vote. Sparks are also expected to fly this morning when a formal motion of no confidence referring specifically to the eviction ban is tabled by Labour. The government's hoping to win both motions after beating a similar motion last week by 15 votes, but how deep will they have to dig to buy the support of the independents, I wonder. It emerged last night, late last night, that the margin of victory on the motion of no confidence may be narrower than anticipated by the government, as many independents are indicating that they will now abstain in the vote. If the coalition does lose tonight's vote, the government will fall. Sinn Féin had tabled legislation that would extend the eviction ban, which is due to lapse on Friday, until January 2024. However, the government said the Dáil declined to give the bill a second reading, as it had already agreed to end the eviction ban on March 31st at a cabinet meeting. And I heard one of the government representatives criticising the wording of the motion from Sinn Féin, which was, to all intents and purposes, the exact same as the government's own motion or own legislation, but with a different date. Right, on to the Mirror now. The family of brave pitbull attack victim Alexandro Mizan have hailed new laws cracking down on dangerous dogs, saying it should help ensure no one else will suffer like he did. The devastating injuries suffered by the 10-year-old last year sparked a fresh review of rules in place surrounding dogs. Yesterday, the government approved new proposals to double fines under the Control of Dogs Act from €2,500 to €5,000. At least 40 new dog wardens will also be hired, along with other measures being put in place. And that is critical, because there's no point having the laws and the regulations if there's no fear of them being enforced. And that's where we are at the moment, I think. So more dog wardens has to be welcomed. Who's behind this? It's Agriculture Minister Charlie McConalogue, who also sought backing from colleagues for recommendations from a working group examining dangerous dogs to increase fines. Alexandro spent 7 weeks in Crumlin's Children's Hospital undergoing treatment after being mauled in his housing estate in Enniscorthy, County Wexford, on November 27th. But do you think that actually goes far enough? I mean, we've heard calls locally before in the past, haven't we, that really there should be like a test or a bar that you must reach before you can own a dog. 086 60 25,000 if you want a view on that. Now, we went through Dublin Airport yesterday, pretty cool, no problems, plain sailing. But it might be different when it's busier. Dublin Airport has unveiled a 15-point master plan. Sounds ominous, doesn't it? To make journeys more pleasant. The changes include less clutter, new eateries, faster Wi-Fi and a dedicated family zone. It's aiming to get the majority of passengers through security in less than 20 minutes, and has vowed a better taxi experience and more bus options. There'll be a major focus on making the airport cleaner, with an extra 1,500 cleaning hours, as well as 120 cleaning inspections every day. Well, let's see how that pans out. We wish them well in their endeavours. We're on the road to ruins. Another story in the papers today. Motorists are being hammered with soaring fuel prices, as almost 1 in 4, that's 23% of us, report they're paying over €300 a month to fill the tank. Overall, more than half of motorists are paying more than $200 a month, as another 33% of those surveyed revealed they were spending between $201 and $300 a month. It all very much depends, of course, how much you use the car, doesn't it? And we in the Northwest are forced to. Let's just put it like that. We don't have alternatives. So we are invariably going to be in the higher scale of that average. And still, persistently, and I noticed yesterday, there are massive variations in different parts of the Northwest. In Letterkenny, you can get petrol in the low 50s, 150s, like 154, 155. The further south you go, 168. Still don't understand exactly what the difference is between two parts of the same county, but anyway, these price increases have led to 7 out of 10 drivers to say fuel is now the top financial concern when it comes to running a car. The same percentage also say they are cutting back on driving because of the exorbitant price of fuel. Again, 086 60 25,000 if you wish to have a say in that. Enoch Burke was back in court yesterday. I was watching some of the live tweeting. The judge in this instance seemed to not want to take any of his shenanigans, can we put it like that? A brother of sacked school teacher Enoch Burke pleaded not guilty yesterday to a breach of peace in connection with the outbursts in the Court of Appeal. Simon Burke is 24, though he looks much younger. A barrister at law he told Cloverhill District Court, "We are not in North Korea, Judge. We are to be thrown into a cell and not to be told," and it's cut off there, I can't see, but I think you get the gist of it here. Let me see, I can pick it up here. He remains in custody and said yesterday that he should have been sitting his drafting exams in King's Inn, as he demanded a speedy trial and accused Gardaí of telling lies. He will learn his hearing date today. The student had been arrested following chaotic scenes where Gardaí intervened in the Court of Appeal in the four courts after a judgment was handed down in teacher Enoch Burke's case on March 7th, but he himself was in court yesterday as well. What do you think about this story relating to Kelly Harrington? She issued an apology yesterday, I believe, after she was caught off guard in an off-the-ball interview. It's off the basis of a tweet she sent. Kelly Harrington, we read, has said she does not want to engage in politically sensitive matters after being grilled about a deleted social media post. Boxer Kelly, 33, refused to answer questions during an interview on News Talk's Off the Ball about a tweet she shared last October. The Olympic gold medalist retweeted a video from GB News 5 months ago, which featured Dutch commentator speaking on the death of a 12-year-old girl in France. In the clip, the commentator said, "I woke up this morning to see the news of another young European girl who was sacrificed on the altar of mass migration. We have 4 people in custody, all migrants coming from Algeria." Harrington commented at the time, very, very sad, a powerful message from Eva Vladingerbroek. Our own leaders should take a listen. Now, after that interview, she was subjected to an awful lot of negativity, of course. I don't know, maybe she should have been engaged in a different platform subsequently to try and tease out her views, maybe give her a better understanding, give her an opportunity to speak. I don't know. I'm not fully comfortable with one wrong seeming to be addressed by another wrong where someone is completely and utterly wiped out. But anyway, if you have any views on that, 086 60 25,000. Dissident Republican terrorists are desperate for a kill. It was warned yesterday in the wake of the MI5 raising the terror threat level. The spy agency increased the threat from substantial, where an attack is likely, to severe, where one is highly likely. The reasons behind that we don't necessarily know. On to the locals now, and I believe this is the Inishowen Independent. The Inishowen woman who lost her father and nephew in a boating accident off the Malin Head has called for public inquiry into maritime safety and for the immediate implementation of recommendations made at the inquest into the deaths. Donna Marie Keenan from Burt lost her 63-year-old dad, Jerry Doherty, and her 16-year-old nephew, Thomas Weir, when their 19-foot boat capsized off Malin Head on July 17th. You can read more about that in the paper, of course. Let's see, where else are we? I've just read that one. And lastly, did you see, I think it's lastly, actually, we'll just stick with this story for now because the Donegal company at the centre of the defective block scandal has been given 2 months to decide whether to contest a case over its non-compliance with planning conditions. Donegal County Council has brought legal proceedings against Cassidy Brothers Concrete Products Limited. The company's been given until the end of May to either plead guilty or fight the case. Right, okay. I think that's about it, isn't it? There are more stories we'll get to as the morning wears on. 086 60 25,000. That's the WhatsApp and text number, 086 60 25,000. You can give us a call on 074 91 25,000. We've got a whole load of guests coming into studio over the next couple of hours. We'll also be talking about a conference on the Good Friday Agreement taking place here in Brussels later today, which we're hoping to attend. So if you have any questions, any comments about EU matters, how they impact you, do you feel they impact you? Do you feel disconnected? Maybe you feel connected. I don't know. I don't want to put thoughts or words in your mouth. Not that I have that ability, of course. 086 60 25,000. That's WhatsApp and text number. Give us a call on 07491 25,000. Comments via email to comments@highlandradio.com. And if you want to watch the programme, our guests are about to join us now. Get onto our social media. Watch us live from Brussels. YouTube, Highland Radio Ireland, across our Facebook pages, on our website. Click Watch Live. Get involved there. We want you on board. All right, we're going to take a quick break. Stay right where you are. We'll be back, as I say, with our first guests in just a couple of minutes. 18 minutes past 9 in Ireland, here where we're sitting at the moment. It is 18 minutes past 10. Right, we're joined in our studio here now by MEP Luke Ming Flanagan, an independent, and also Johan Wake, European Integration, International Trade Law and Policy. Is that it? Yes. And Arab, Gulf States and European Union. That's it. I got there in the end. Okay, before we get on to all matters European, Luke, any update on the EU's role in the defective concrete crisis in Donegal at the moment in terms of any moves that they may be inclined to make? Or I think there's visits upcoming. I'm not sure. I don't want to spring that on you. Are you across that at the moment? Just
excuse me, Greg. Last Thursday, the Petitions Committee of the European Parliament, which the MICA Action Group made a presentation in front of a couple of years ago and impressed them. Petition was kept open, and last Thursday, basically at the Petitions Committee, at the coordinators meeting, where they decide what that committee is going to be doing for the next 6 months, my group put in a request that they visit Donegal. They call it a mission, to use the Brussels speak. We didn't expect the group to agree to it because there was a couple of other applications in to go to Spain, etc. But thanks to the Left MEP, Sira Riga, they have agreed to come to Donegal. So that means, from the point of view of the people who have their houses basically in this horrific position, it means that MEPs from that committee will actually come out and see them for themselves firsthand. And I know they've heard about them, and I had heard about them, but when you see them, I don't need to tell you, I've watched what you've been doing, I've watched your Twitter accounts. When you see them, you really, really get the idea of how horrific the situation is. So in October of this year, that committee is going to come out. It's going to look at what's happened. It's going to report back to the committee. From that, ideally, they will propose that infringement proceedings be taken against Ireland and that they encourage the Internal Market and Consumer Affairs Commission to push this further. We also have a meeting, we're basically at the moment preparing a meeting with that same Directorate General of Internal of Consumer Affairs with the MICA group in the next couple of months. So at the moment, it's we're talking to them, and basically we're trying to have the maximum possible effect. But there is a quicker way around this, that the government actually do it. I would prefer if we didn't have someone coming over, observing and telling us the right thing to do in the same way as the IMF did with our finances. But unfortunately, that's where we are. But this isn't going away, and the EU are now focusing on it.
Sorry, Luke, is this moral support, or might it actually progress things? Because the government will argue that we've put in place an enhanced scheme that is better than the one that went before it. You know, we're taking regulation and enforcement and all that much more seriously. What are you on about, Europe? What else do you want us to do here? They will be able to make that argument. So other than this being really very, very significant, do you think it progresses the plight of a frustrated homeowner listening to this programme this morning? And that's not in any way to put it down.
It's a very good question. And if you had asked me a year ago, I would have said the main role that I would have in this and the European Parliament would have in this is to shine a light on it and to put pressure on the authorities in Ireland. But I'm delighted to say they're actually taking it even more serious, because there are regulations out there within the European Union on standards for building materials. And to me and to the MICA Action Group, it's quite clear that these standards haven't been followed. And we have cross-party support on this. We have support from an EPP MEP called Peter Yar, who I work with on the Agriculture Committee. And I'll quote what he said: "What is the point in having European rules and regulations if they're not in force?" So they are taking this seriously, and I have to say more seriously than I thought they would. And I have to say it has somewhat tempered my Euroscepticism. In fact, every week that I'm here, it is tempered somewhat.
Wow, that's worrying.
Well, you work on the basis.
We don't want you work on the basis.
You work on the basis of what you're presented with.
Of course you are.
If you see good things, you point it out. If you see bad things, like us putting more money into basically what is a European army called PESCO by another name, you oppose that. But if I see good things, I'm going to support them because otherwise you're just a populist.
Right, okay, and thank you very much for the update in that. Right, so we have Brexit MEPs, they're no longer in the chamber here. But there does seem to be, now I'm not stating it as a fact, but there does seem to be a growing anti-EU sentiment. Far left, far right, they gained. They've got their own agendas in this regard. So, Johan, let me ask you, what do you believe the future of the EU looks like? Because even in Ireland, in our own country, I wouldn't disregard the anti-sort of EU Irexit movement, because you do that at your peril, I believe. Not that it's up for me to oppose them, don't get me wrong. What do you see for the future of the EU?
Well, it's hard to say. I would not really agree if there is an EU anti-sentiment. I think you should narrow it down to the nationalistic atmosphere, because what we see, especially since COVID, that people start to revolt in the sense that people say, okay, we are not happy with the lockdown. We are not happy that prices go up. Is this to be blamed to, let's say, the European Union? Because the European Union for the average EU citizen is not very visible. The treaties have outlined that there is EU citizenship, but the EU institutions, so to speak, are far away from the average you and me. So there should be, let's say, more information. I think the Brexit is basically due to two factors. There was populism, because Nigel Farage misinformed or ill-informed, if you see it like this, the public. So I think that the average Brexit voter already regrets that the UK is out of the European Union because there were substantial benefits. Now they have, let's say, a different relationship with the European Union. We have seen that there were problems when the Brexit effectively took effect. But it is really also perhaps maybe a positive thing the Lisbon Treaty provided for this, because before there was never ever an exit clause. So a member could say, I would like to be in the European Union, but there was no possibility to go out. This is now tested, so this can create a precedent, let's say, for other member states. I don't see immediately that there is any member state who will exit the European Union.
And perhaps maybe the experience of the British is the greatest advertisement for staying in the EU?
I would say so, because the European...
You don't agree, Luke?
No, I think it's pretty much undeniable.
Yes, I think it's all gone to pot.
I think it's
intended.
really an issue like the European institution should be more proactive. The Lisbon Treaty, or at least the Lisbon Treaty before, was voted down in the Netherlands and other countries. In France, they say the populace said no. Yes, in Ireland too, twice I think. So in 2009, just before the ratification, I think the Irish had to have certain protocols, exceptions to it. But it's fairly important that the European citizen understands what the European Union is for, that this is not a federal supranational state. So this is not really moving in, let's say, a very centralized Brussels bureaucracy. There is still some influence by the member states.
Yeah, but can I just give you a typical example before I bring Luke in here? I think yesterday they got the ban on, petrol, diesel, internal combustion engines across the line yesterday. I think the Germans were holding out, but I understand that now has been okayed from 2035, right? So if you're sitting in Ireland, right, you're in Donegal, you're in Roscommon or Leitrim, and you very much rely on your car, you feel, right, that, well, that is Europe, that's Brussels now taking my ICE engine car off me. That's the relationship, it seems, that we have with Europe. Do you know what I mean? So whilst we might not understand everything that goes on, the headlines that come out always seem to be they're taking our fish, they're taking our cars. Do you think there's a role, maybe, I'm not saying that's the reality, or is it? I think people, governments, MEPs, whoever it might be, have to counteract that and talk more about the work that's done.
Well, it's definitely also an issue about, let's say, European integration. This is 27 member states who act and decide together. So what is probably good for one issue, like the Green Deal, is probably not so good for, let's say, what you mentioned here in terms of the motor industry. So there are lobby influences, there are all kinds of structures at work who try to get the best deal from European integration. It is also not so that the individual EU member states does not have an influence. This is a democratic institution. You can say there is a democratic deficit, but generally we are a democratic institution which is rule-based, and the public does have an influence either by direct or indirect elections, and they can participate. There is a civil dialogue.
Johan, thank you for that. Do you agree with that? I want you to come in at will, Luke. Luke.
I just want to comment on the idea, this thing of the rise of the far right and the far left. Well, the first thing you've got to do is, what do you define as far left and what do you define as far right? Do you define far left as, now far left is described as saying people should have a house. Now far left is saying you should have a higher corporation tax of 12.5% when it was above 50% and above 60% in the United States of America during its most prosperous era in the 1970s. So to define what's far left nowadays in political science terms, the Overton window has moved extremely to the right. And what was considered a middle ground now is considered the extreme left. But from the point of view of the growth of the left and the right, I'd have to say, unfortunately, it would be incorrect to say that there has been a growth in the left. There has indeed been a growth in the right. Fine, in France, the left did quite well in the parliamentary elections, but in other countries that is not the case. And it probably will happen in France in the European elections, but I don't see a rise in the far left within the European Union. From the point of view of the European Union having an influence, let's say for the people of Donegal, my most direct experience of how the European Union works is my participation in the Common Agricultural Policy Review. Now, people are probably a bit bored of me talking about it, but this is my core experience of dealing with the European Parliament and how the Parliament deals with Council and how they deal with the Commission in a trialogue. And what I can see is that from the point of view of Donegal, the European Parliament had a role in setting minimum amounts that farmers in Donegal would get, setting a minimum amount for the convergence of payments at 85%, whereas the Council wanted to set it at 70%. This was worth, and you can check out the figures, tens of millions of euros to the people of Donegal. Then there's another line in that text when it comes to peatlands and when it comes to carbon-rich soils. It's a thing called GAIAC 2. It is a provision that's put in there if you want to farm on those lands. We fought tooth and nail that agricultural activity would be guaranteed, quote unquote, in that regulation. We got it in there. So it meant then that when the plans were put together at a national level, Charlie McConalogue had no choice but to give a minimum of that amount of money to the people of Donegal. He had no choice but to take 10% of the overall CAP budget and give it to the poorer farmers. We left him without a choice. He had a choice to go further. He didn't go further. But without what the European Parliament did and without the decision that we made, Donegal would be tens of millions of euros less well off. And finally, I was against the Lisbon Treaty. But look, you learn things as you go along in life. And in the Lisbon Treaty, because of the Lisbon Treaty, as an MEP who hitched to his first meeting, eventually got elected, became the representative for our group, the Left, became one of 8 MEPs who got to negotiate basically a third of the European Union budget. It meant that we had actually a voice in the room. So while it isn't perfect, it's certainly better than not having a say. But I was disappointed given that most of the governments would have supported the Lisbon Treaty. During trialogue negotiations, they tried to deny it existed. They tried to deny us a voice. But we fought hard and we did get heard. But it wasn't because they wanted to listen to us. It was actually because they had no choice. And while I didn't support the Lisbon Treaty, the people who did support it then in the trialogues didn't actually support it there. I do support it now because it's there and that's the law. And we do have an influence. I didn't think we would. I wish we had more. But I have to say I was proved wrong, and I'm delighted I was proved wrong.
Yeah, OK. And that's the voice there of MEP Luke Ming Flanagan. We also have Johan Wake with us as well. We'll be back with more from our two guests and your questions coming into them on 086 60 25,000 or on 07491 25,000 after we take this quick break.
Watch the show live now.
Back live. Oh, well, yeah, we are indeed. We're just having a chit chat here off air. My fault, of course. We're still in the company of our guests, Ming Flanagan, MEP, of course. What's the European view of what's happening in Ukraine? I'll start with you, Johan, or your view in that, there is a sense as well in Ireland, and I'm sorry to talk about senses and stuff like about, the feeling that there's an increase in the left and the right and all that type of stuff. But I just want to I want to try and capture the what people are feeling and the conversations we're having in our kitchens and front rooms. There is sort of a sense that Ireland's been dragged out of its neutrality, that, there was a recent comment made by a senior government representative that talked about we need to have a conversation about our neutrality, but the position was as if it were for us to get rid of it, right? As opposed to strengthening it, or actually
mature conversation. Don't forget that word, because apparently it's been immature up until now.
Right. Well, we will always want a mature one, right? So I'm kind of conflating issues here too as well. But as well, Europe is very heavily invested in what's happening in Ukraine and backing Ukraine. What's your overview of what's happening, Johan, on a European perspective, and maybe we can get Luke's view on the Irish perspective then?
Well, there can be no doubt there is definitely a moral obligation, not least from the European Commission, the Council, the European Parliament, because they created expectations. I'm not speaking about the statements which have been made immediately following the invasion of the so-called special operation of Vladimir Putin. But we have to be realistic. When the events already started in Ukraine in 2004, then it went back to 2014. And 2014, when Vladimir Putin invaded the Crimea, the world stood by. There was no intervention. So it was basically, okay, he can get away with it. That meant that the European Union did not really seize the momentum to create, let's say, on possibilities. There was an association agreement. This association agreement got some opposition in my own member states, which is the Netherlands. There was a kind of referendum, or at least there was a call for a referendum to block this, but the association agreement nevertheless went ahead. Now we see that this is there is no solution immediately in sight. This is going to be costly. Is it going to be costly for the average consumer? That is the key question, because the European institutions are very generous in donating money because they stimulate that. The member states follow their advices. But what we see is that the average consumer is beginning to think. First there was COVID, which prices went up. Salaries were a little bit, discussions for the trade unions. And then suddenly we have this war in Ukraine, which is very costly. The question now is, can Europe sustain this? Because we have a looming issue with the banking sector again. So everybody is now beginning to remember what happened in 2008, 2009. And now the consumer is beginning to say, okay, what is next? And this is a tricky situation, because we have spoken about the far right, we have spoken about the far left. All kinds of parties with a populistic angle will bank on this, and this might create a certain sentiment saying, okay, I can support the Ukrainians, but this year will be very decisive because support will wane. It will definitely go down if there is no solution, because nobody is speaking really about peace, President Zelensky.
Yeah, but the EU is not exactly making any suggestions that it's keen to talk peace either, unless I've missed it. It just, all I hear is, more and more weapons, more and more tanks. Are we going to send planes? Why do you think the EU would not be interested in maybe a negotiated settlement? Or that seems to be we even had the Ireland's Taoiseach Premier saying that we need to stop Putin in his tracks. That's coming from a supposedly neutral country.
Exactly. If you remember well, everybody last year in the end of April was saying, okay, we have to watch carefully what Vladimir Putin is going to say on the 1st of May, because the 1st of May is a traditional national day in the Russian Federation. Everybody was expecting that Vladimir Putin was going to declare full war, because they were saying, okay, special operations will now become a full war, but it didn't happen. In fact, his speech on the 1st of May was pretty moderate. There would have been, let's say, an opportunity to say, okay, let's see this as a kind of opportunity to open some kind of back channel negotiation, and not with a high-profile person like Emmanuel Macron, because he had a political agenda because of the French presidential election. But why not a person like Angela Merkel? She has, let's say, a similar
relationship
background,
there,
relationship with Vladimir Putin. This could have created, let's say, a kind of opportunity.
There's no appetite for that.
No, I think that it is fair to say that the European Union and the Americans would like to give Vladimir Putin, let's say, the final blow. They would like to wipe him out indefinitely and hope that the opposition...
That's very dangerous, though, because this is a person with access to extremely end-of-game weapons, effectively. I mean... and of course, too, you've got external parties as well looking on with great interest. This is draining the West, let me put it like that as well. I'm sure the Chinese are watching on with great interest, the North Koreans elsewhere, other members of BRIC, etc.
I think one of the problems in this conversation is, and I think what you said was really interesting and very instructive and informed, is that there's a lot of people who listen to you would immediately say, oh, you're being soft on Putin, as if that's going to solve the problem, saying that. But what you said makes a lot of sense. But to even have that conversation is difficult now, because it's this immediate thing. If you're talking about peace, you can't talk about peace because the Ukraine aren't the aggressor. We know they're not the aggressor. It's clear that Vladimir Putin is... whatever, describe him in every negative terms you want. He is a rotten individual. But saying that doesn't solve the problem. But what you've said there makes an awful lot of sense. But from the point of view of Ireland, like, what's Ireland's contribution to this? Like, what significant difference militarily can Ireland make? We can't make any difference, significant military difference to Ukraine here. So the idea that we get involved in that sense is silly, because we gain nothing and we lose something potentially when this war does come to the end, from the point of view of someone who can be a peace broker, someone who can be talked
Luke,
to,
should we have
someone
done
who
that
can
without a
negotiate
conversation with the people? Because, you know, like, it does, obviously we're not...
Sorry, but Greg, we have had the conversation with the people, and even after, and initially my thought was, oh my God, I'd nearly want to go out and fight myself, because when I seen the first pictures, I thought, Jesus, if that was my kids, I will do anything. But when you sit down and you rationally think about it, as the Irish people did, and then with all of that emotion there, if they're surveyed and asked, do you still want to remain military neutral? And I was shocked, but I was so proud of the people. They came back, and 2/3 of them and more said they wanted to remain military neutral. So the people of Ireland, even in the heat of this, in an emotional time, are still saying, no, it isn't that we don't want to help anyone, we want to do what's practical.
What about
can
politically
Ireland
neutral?
do best?
Are you happy that we politically have picked a side?
Well,
again, because
I
there
think
could be
there
a
is
missed opportunity
absolutely
as a
no
broker.
harm in pointing out the bleeding obvious.
Yeah,
that
of
Vladimir
course, yeah.
Putin is an absolutely horrific individual, and so what he has done is wrong. But from the point of view of us saying, or Taoiseach coming out saying pretty much that we need to eradicate him, what can Ireland do to make that happen? Absolutely nothing. Is saying it making it any more likely to happen? No. Is it making us any?
So what
is
should
it
he have
making
said,
us
Luke?
any safer? No.
So what language would you like him to be using?
Well, he needs to use the language of, we need to find a negotiated settlement on this that the Ukrainian people are happy with, that basically brings an end to basically putting people through a meat grinder, which is what's happening now.
Like, it really is terrible. Like, and I'm thinking on young Russian men and women as well that probably don't know precisely what they're being sent into, like battling over a city of no consequence whatsoever, the incredible loss of life, and we're all funding that as well. And then it seems to be no effort at all to try and even to, even if you mention a ceasefire, it's shot down by them saying, well, that's just going to give Putin a chance to regroup.
Yeah.
Do you know, you know what I mean? So even if you
one
try
of the questions you were asking, I think that you sent through to us was the amount of money that's been spent there. Is it money being well spent? And look, I can come on here and I can give you my opinion and say this and that about it, but as an MEP, I do have a role. I am a member of the Budget Control Committee. The Budget Control Committee, probably the dullest committee in the European Parliament, but probably the most important one. It looks at how every last cent of your money, all the people who are listening here, is spent. And at the last coordinators meeting, I'm a coordinator for our group on that committee, we discussed whether we would invite the Ukrainian Interior Minister into our committee to talk to them about how the money is being spent. Because remember, two things can be true. Vladimir Putin can be a monster. The Ukrainian people are going through hell. But it can also be true that there is a lot of corruption in Ukraine. And the European Court of Auditors have brought out a report. It's headed by a Dublin man, Tony Murphy, brilliant, one of the best European Union people I have met. And they have produced reports to show that there is massive corruption. We need to help the Ukrainian people, but we will help them more by scrutinising how that money is spent. So I'm hoping, and it looks like it will happen, that the Budget Control Committee will invite ministers from Ukraine to explain to us exactly how the money is being spent, and that's a good forum to do it.
All right, Johan, sorry, if you want to follow on from that, and then I'll ask you another question.
I would like to make a comment, because wasn't it so that Vladimir Putin was a little bit neglected? We have to go back to 2007. The story is not well known, but it is completely ignored by the discussion which we have since a year. In 2007, to my knowledge, Vladimir Putin spoke in Munich to the annual security conference. He was saying like, okay, I see that the European Union is becoming a bigger entity in terms of membership. That was not a problem for him. But he said something like they are also taking on board these countries as NATO members. Mm-hmm. So I see the NATO coming in my direction.
Well, I just put to that, though, his invasion of Ukraine brings him closer to NATO.
Yes, but he said, kind of reaching out, we are living now in a post-Soviet era. We need to think about a new security structure. This was reaching out. The European Union and the United States of America should have capitalized on this. They should have recognized this kind of talk and saying, okay, maybe he is right because we are not really exactly friends, but we need to figure out a new kind of structure. It didn't happen. So in 2008, Vladimir Putin tested the waters in Georgia, in Chechnya, Dagestan. Was there a reaction? Vladimir Putin saw there was no international reaction. Vladimir Putin said, okay, you never know what I can expect from the West. So he prepared for a war economy, which the European Union did not. Mm-hmm. So now we are speaking here about 70 billion euros. It's lost, it's gone, it's never going back. So could this have been prevented, let's say, in 2008, 2009 momentum?
And not only that, Luke, would you agree to some extent, and this is in no way to back Putin as such, like, we can't ignore the fact that not only maybe did we not speak to him in the context Johan's talking about, but NATO, the West, America, Europe poked him. They poked the bear to some extent too.
Yeah, without doubt. I mean, if they're worried...
To what end, like, you know?
Well, to the end, to basically get rid of Russia, who they see as a problem forever and ever. But it was never going to be that simple. But all I know is it's an absolute and utter mess now.
How does it end, Luke? And before we take another quick break, and then we'll move on to our final subject. How does this end? Because I don't see anyone really motivated for it to end, and we don't know where this might go.
At the moment, I don't see any end. I don't see any end to this. All I see is... from both sides is that, as in, I don't mean from the Ukrainian side, but from the NATO side, from the US side, there can be no peace negotiations. We need to get them completely and utterly out of Ukrainian territory.
But that's never going to happen.
Even though there's a contradiction there in that they didn't go to war with them when they went into Crimea. But now a solution will have to involve them leaving Crimea. It seems like the standards are higher now that they've decided to go to war.
But you see, if Crimea were on the table... Putin, and listen, a lot of it's about saving face. I presume he could make a very strong argument that in the east of Ukraine, he has achieved his set goals. Like he could sell that he has. I mean, he's annihilated it. But if Crimea is not on the table, I don't see how any solution could be found. I'll ask the same question to you, Johan. Do you see an end to this, and if so, how?
Yes, I'm not pessimistic. We see that a new power broker is emerging on the world stage.
You think China?
Yes,
right.
We have seen that the Chinese have kind of brokered an agreement between the Saudis and the Iranians, and we still have to see how this is going to be played out. But it's well known, the world is moving to multilateralism, a multipolar with eventually a new center of gravity. Nobody was expecting that this would go violently, but it is not unlikely if it is not China. We have also seen that the King of Bahrain has recently proposed that he is willing to make an effort to bring the parties together, because we should be realistic. Zelensky has a peace proposal. Somebody has to capitalize on this, and we don't really know what is happening back channel wise. Mm-hmm. So if, let's say, the Europeans and the Americans can live with the idea that Vladimir Putin and Zelensky are going to sit together with, let's say, a neutral partner, because this is definitely about...
Okay, just let me ask you, right, let's just imagine, right, that it's not actually Zelensky making the shots here, calling the shots here, right? And he kind of would have to get some approval from Brussels or Washington. Will that be forthcoming? Like, is there a international appetite on this side, so to speak, for an end to this effectively proxy war?
Maybe I see it wrong, but I think that Joe Biden gave a strong signal. We have seen this debate about towing more military equipment to the front lines, but this military equipment is usually only reserved for NATO partners because it has to do with a qualitative advantage on the front line. All of a sudden, these fighter jets needed to be downgraded because if they are going to be delivered, there is a risk that such a shoot-down can deliver, let's say, Western technology to the Russians. This was not to the liking to certain countries. But then suddenly Joe Biden said, okay, Zelensky does not need these fighter jets. So that is, in my point, the first observation that the Americans are willing to say, okay, we are not going to deliver all kinds of weaponry at all costs.
But everyone hasn't suffered out of this either. There's an awful lot of ordinary people have suffered. But if you're involved in the fracking industry in the United States of America, if you're involved in exporting gas, I mean, it's been open season for them, and for those people who wanted to push back on moves to do something about climate change, on biodiversity loss. We've had proposals from the European Union where we should grow grain on every last bit of environmentally friendly land that's there, because if we don't, we'll all starve. So lots of people have taken advantage of it, and now we have too much grain, but they haven't rowed back on that. We still have ignoring environmental concerns. So
I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll skip going to the break, and then I'll take a double head into 10, and then I can let you guys get on with your very busy agendas. You talked about corruption in Ukraine, and I'm not saying it's corruption as such, but there was quite a controversy, Qatar gate, I think it was referred to here. We were talking about that at home as well, because we only focus on the negative things, you see.
Well, can I tell you how I've seen it from...
Has the reputation of the EU been damaged, or is it damaged, or what?
Well, I didn't have an amazingly high opinion of the EU when I got elected in the first place anyway, so
your pessimism's been chipped away.
My opinion did go up, but this certainly didn't help. But I'll tell you, from an MEP's perspective, sitting in the chamber, listening to an MEP that I thought was on the side of social justice, standing up and saying, and at that time I was going, will I watch the World Cup? Can I watch this knowing what I know? And then I heard a particular MEP that I trusted stand up in the European Parliament and say, hold on a minute, you've got it wrong. There have been a lot of improvements when it comes to human rights in Qatar. When it comes to workers' rights, we are working on this. We are talking to these people. Things are changing. Now, I was looking for an out because I wanted to watch the World Cup, but I'll tell you straight, I left the chamber that day going, maybe I've got it wrong. I watched the whole of the World Cup. The guy who made the speech is currently in prison.
Right. What do you think? Did that damage the EU's reputation?
Well, I think it's fair to say that there is a certain sentiment where certain people begin to say, is the European Parliament more interested in blatant money-making rather than serious or credible lawmaking? That is definitely an observation.
You're going to have to answer that question. You can't pose it.
No, but there is definitely a perception in terms of image of the European Parliament. This is maybe also the reason why the Qataris sought access to the European Parliament, because in the Gulf there is another perception about wheeling and dealing. And wheeling and dealing and kickbacks is not unique to the Arab world. It's well known that Brussels has a reputation. There are more than 20,000 lobbyists around here. If you go on a Thursday evening here to Place Luxembourg, you can see them, you can meet them. But what are these people doing?
I don't know, but I want to get my hands on some of this EU money. What do I have to do? Whose do I have to sell my soul to?
Yeah, but we should.
Obviously, they don't rate me very highly because none of them have
don't
come
wine
to
and
me.
dine you.
The only
Okay.
lobbyists who come to me are small-scale farmers, small-scale fishers, etc. The
that's
big ones
good. That's a
tend
good
not to
sign.
come
Yeah,
their way.
But go
we
finish
should,
your point, Johan,
we
sorry.
should not be naive. I mean, everybody is focusing to the parliamentarians and to, let's say, other institutions and lobbyists. But isn't it so that European industrial world has a substantial interest in these countries? Because face the reality, we always speak in the European Parliament, in the Council, in the Commission. There is even a mandatory political dialogue and trade deals, human rights, rule of law, fundamental freedoms, civil liberties. But the European industries, the builders who built the stadiums, the architects who designed these buildings, from which countries are they?
Yeah.
So there is a kind of sentiment when the European Parliament says, okay, we have a co-decision on this or that proposed legislation. These lobbyists say, wait a minute, because we have an interest. We don't want this security on, let's say, the construction site. We don't want, let's say, restrictions in labor hours, these kinds of things, and the situation improved in the labor camps, because this is all about blatant money making. You cannot blame the Arab Gulf states. It's also the responsibility also from, let's say, a European perspective, because we have a vested interest at economic regime.
Okay, I think people get
Well,
that.
look, there's talk of
Briefly,
cooling
Luke,
off
if that's
periods
okay. Yeah.
after people stop being MEPs. I think that should be extended to 2 years. I think it should also be there
Cooling
for
off from
parliamentary
lobbying or other
from
high-profile
going
jobs
off
and-
working in industry that you had previously made
Yeah, for sure.
decisions
Love to
on
see that in
potential
Ireland as well.
regulation and legislation. And likewise for parliamentary assistants, you can have someone working on an environmental file one day, and then you can have them working for the oil industry the next day. You can have someone working on the Econ Committee in the European Parliament as an MEP from Ireland, and then you can have them working on behalf of the Irish banking.
Or you can have someone working for the
people
you can have someone
next.
working for the Road Safety Authority one day and then working for insurance companies the next. It happens all over the
That
place.
shouldn't be allowed.
Yeah, Luke Ming Flanagan, MEP, thank you so much for calling into us. Johan, thank you so much as well. It's been really interesting for me to get your insight. Johan Wake, I beg your pardon. We'll be back with the weather after this break. Thank you very much.
The one and only Tom Jones is back, and we're going to be there. Join us as Highland Radio hit the road to see the timeless legend as he headlines Belsonic 2023, Friday 16th of June. Your trip includes luxury transfers, bed and breakfast in the 4-star Clayton Hotel Belfast, and your standing ticket to the outdoor event. Contact us today on 074 9125,000 to see Tom Jones at Ormo Park, Belfast, Friday 16th of June.
Some people get up early every morning. But on the morning of May 6th, we want everyone to be up for the most important sunrise of the year. Whether it's your first time or 10th time, join Pieta and Electric Ireland for this year's Darkness into Light. On May 6th,
Wednesday will begin dull, damp and breezy with patches of mist and drizzle. A band of more persistent rain will move up later in the morning, while sunny spells will develop in the afternoon. Thundery showers will follow too, with possible spot flooding and isolated thunderstorms. Blustery and fresh and gusty southwest winds, strong at times in the west. Another mild day. Temperatures 13 to 15 degrees. And strangely, well, not strangely, but I wasn't really fully aware of it. The weather here in Brussels, very similar to that in beautiful Donegal. All right, stay with us. Over the next couple of hours, we're going to try and give you more of an insight. And I know it's a different type of a show, but I hope you're enjoying it. A little bit more of an insight as to what goes on over here in Brussels and how it might impact us. We're also going to be talking about a conference, a Good Friday conference, which is coming up, which is taking place here. We're going to go and have a look at that and see who we can talk to. That's a little bit later on. So stay tuned, stay where you are. And just to remind you of the contact details, 086 60 25,000. That's your WhatsApp, that's your text. And give us a call too on 074 91 25,000. So as it approaches 10 o'clock at home, 11 o'clock here in Brussels, we're going to take a break now for the news and obituary notices. Stay right where you are.
Sleep specialist today. Massive mattress sale now on.
9 till noon show here. We're broadcasting live from the EU Parliament, and we'll be joined very shortly by MEP Maria Walsh of Fine Gael, and we're going to talk about how this place works and what MEPs do here as well. Some of your comments coming in. I understand that 300,000 Ukrainians have now been killed, along with 160,000 Russians, says a listener, which comes to close to 500,000 in total. Can Parliament intervene to put an end to the rising toll? Well, you heard from our two earlier guests in relation to that. Ireland is facing a disaster with housing. Our government were stuck because of EU policy Airbnbs, and our boats can't fish in our own waters. It feels like Ireland is being punished for Brexit. There is a sense out there, whether it's provable or not, that our fishing rights were a key sacrifice, you could say, to getting Brexit over the line. There is that view out there. As it relates to the Airbnbs, I don't know. I'm not sure everyone wants that Airbnb policy to come in Ireland, but we shall see. Another person says the left are destroying the country. Lisbon Treaty made us vote twice because they didn't like the first answer. Another, at this stage, I'd rather be poorer than have open borders policy and see our children being able to build homes and raise families, not to leave our shores to other countries. Now, the one thing I will say on that, and perhaps it's not for me to say, the housing crisis, the difficulties in people being able to build on their own lands, the provision of housing, the problem. I think everyone concedes there's a problem there. Predates anything that happened in the last couple of years, but I understand your point of view. Another huge respect for Ming Flanagan. And other people have to keep their thinking as clear as possible when making decisions. I think what is wrong in Russia is being isolated, and that is not going to solve anything. I think we need to look back to the Cuban Missile Crisis and see how a major war was averted there. Another, why is the UN not having more of a say in finding a solution? What is their role in this? What is the opinion of Hunter Biden in the Ukraine and the discovery of his laptop? I'm not sure that's a huge concern to the people of Ukraine, but I appreciate your text. I very much agree with Luke Ming, talking a lot of common sense. Another, Greg, does the pub open on a Good Friday? Just let's intervene the European conversation. I'm not sure. I thought that was done away with. Caroline will probably be able to tell me, do the pubs open on Good Friday? If not, Kevin certainly will. My daughter, Shauna McLaughlin, is in Brussels with Carndonagh Community School. I want to thank the school and staff who made the trip possible. The students are having a great time. We're listening from Malin this morning in from her mum. Where are they? It's a shame we couldn't have got a couple of students from Carndonagh on. Right, okay. We are going to take a break. We're going to have the bingo numbers for you, a quick break. And then we're going to be joined by MEP Maria Walsh to talk through a number of issues. And we've got so much more coming up between now and, I don't know what time it is, now and 12 in Ireland, now and 1 here in Brussels. We'll be back after these. Okay, the time is 12 minutes past 10. You're very welcome along to this special 9 till noon show, broadcasting live here from the EU Parliament in Brussels. If you've any questions on the workings of the EU, its role, its future, get in touch with us. 086 60 25,000, 086 60 25,000, or call 07491 25,000. Listen, we were delighted to welcome the invite to come here because a lot of the decisions that impact on your lives are made here. And I just feel as of late, and I'm joined now by MEP Maria Walsh, I just feel that, and it's not down to the likes of yourself, you publish plenty of press releases, and maybe it's down to the likes of us that maybe don't publish as much of them as we possibly should. I just get a sense that maybe 7, 8, 9 years ago, my timings are all off. Maybe it's 10 years ago. I don't know. That it felt like, our MEPs were more part of the news cycle with councillors and TDs. You work with lots of different radio stations and papers. Do you find it hard to get your stuff out there?
Yes, I find it, first and foremost, note that he requested his coffee at 11, whatever it is. He's very demanding here since he stepped into the Parliament.
I don't know where I learned this from. Maria, I don't know where I learned it from.
But to answer your very serious question, I do. And I remember over the 2019 campaign speaking with people asking, fundamentally, I put my hand up and got involved based off asking 10 friends, multiple reasons why, but this was really the catalyst for me. 10 friends across various networks in my life saying, what does an MEP do and who's your MEP? And 9 of them came back saying, I don't know. So the conversation then became quite big for me in terms of why is there a disconnect? And then you get elected, fortunately, and my team and I do, like all MEPs, multiple work in trying to make the piece of what happens in Europe, what happens in Ireland, and make that piece a little bit more connected. And it's a really hard sell to sell, which is incredibly sad.
I do want to put hands up and think the media have a significant role in that because, as I say, the MEPs are out here. They have press people. They're accessible. Pretty good. You're very accessible, but across the board, Luke Ming, we've spoken to, and others. And I just think I think the likes of ourselves and others perhaps need to do a bit more. And that's not doing anyone a disservice if there's journalists listening that do lots of it. I don't mean it like that. I'm sort of making it as an overview.
I would imagine, and this is from speaking to you and your team and then many living in communities, what happens in Europe seems very far away. I think our lads and ladies at a national front don't do us any service either. And I tell this to my party all the time. If it's good day, it's coming from national funding, where it might be important, where it might be propped and supported by EU funding.
And sometimes, it's phrased, and I don't want to talk about any particular TDs because I think it's across the board, and I think it will be across all parties, which is ever. Sometimes it suits them, even though maybe the EU has had a role in the positive news. It's like the big bad wolf. We took them on and we won, which doesn't do you many favours.
It does, and it actually does a disservice to democracy here. And we have 13 MEPs while we're a small country, hopefully more in
14
next year.
Maybe, yeah.
And while we're a small country, we play a very big role in democracy building in various political parties right across the EU, and that really needs to be recognised. Plus, we hold multiple EU positions as a small country. I heard MEP Flanagan speak of Tony Murphy, Court of Auditors president, like a phenomenal role to be sitting in. But the sell is often very difficult at home, which is frustrating. But where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah. Now, you get the sense that what does the EU do? It's taking away our fishing. It's taking away. It's trying to take away our farming. It's taking away our cars. It's taking away our turf. That's I think a perception that's out there. Is that a fair? What? I presume all these same conversations are happening in every other country as well.
Yes, from the fishing, I do agree, and I know a previous text had come in around that. decades ago that a
The
deal,
70s. I know that because
a
and
deal
it'll say
was done,
we sold our fishing rights, and certain names will be mentioned. I mean, that happens every time we have a talk about fish.
And we have to be fair to that, and we have to be there. You can't pivot around what has happened. But what, in my eyes, the EU and us being here, and the EU being within the Irish legislation and community, for me is, this year we celebrate our 50th anniversary. The removal of the marriage bar was, as a young female, our first step into what equality feels like. We still have a long way to go. Just this morning I was debating equal pay for equal work.
This is the marriage bar that's still leaving women very shortchanged in terms of pensions.
Absolutely.
So we've made progress, but we still have the hangover.
But you could do that in various sectors. When you look at the just to finish off in terms of equal pay for equal work, 50 years on, we're still trying to make that work. Other countries in the EU buy into it, some don't. For us, and for me as a young representative from the west of Ireland, I think it's incredibly important. Now the next iteration is making sure the pension pay gap is removed, so that we don't continue to have generations left out from access to opportunity or financial security. When you take it agriculture, I mean, while it has its good pros and indifference, and I know MEP Flanagan, and I believe you're going to speak to MEP Markey later on, two reps from the Agriculture Committee, for us, we also can't be ignorant to the fact that we have received billions of funding to make sure the likes of farm safety is there, the likes of access to land for our young farmers is there. A hell of a lot more work to do, but it certainly has given us a space to develop our side of the country, and I think that's incredibly important. Absolutely, it's important to be critical, but we need to be fair within that critic.
And I'm not saying it's separate to it. I think a lot of conversation about farming at the moment is that, farming, yes, it is a major contributor to the climate problem, but it seems almost fashionable to blame it all on farmers, and then it pitches the society against farmers, not society, sorry, pits those who aren't in farming against the crying farmers. And sometimes I think it suits the decision makers to sow those seeds, to get things across the line. Because if you're criticizing a farmer, you're not criticizing maybe the person that's actually making the decision.
Fundamentally, and I've stressed this so many times before, farming is not to blame. We are in a crisis of food security. Long before the war against Ukraine started, we have a lack of equality when we come to payments across the country, across the EU. And I think for a country that is golden standard in produce, we as consumers need to adapt and understand that food doesn't come from shelves. While we might buy it there, it certainly comes from really hard work. But I think farmers, I was on a farm in Kildare just Monday. Farmers are trying to be innovative, and we need to make sure here as representatives that we're removing as much red tape as we can for them to do exactly what they've been doing for generations. Similar to our fishermen and women. I mean, they've been the custodians of our green and blue landscapes for decades. So we've got to get them to do their job, should they wish to do it.
Yeah, and I think, even if it felt like, the EU was working with fishers to some extent, because you might be familiar with the fact that at the moment, they might still be in the waters. We had two of the world's biggest fish factories, which have been responsible for mass fish kills off the Spanish coast, for an example. And we have them fishing in Irish waters, decimating stocks, not just the stocks that they're fishing. Now, the logical thing would be to say, right, okay, well, you have the quotas, but you need to fish them in smaller boats with smaller nets because it's more green, it's more sustainable, right? So if you're a fisher that can't get into those waters and you see what's going on and it's actually really, really poor environmental practice, it's very frustrating. And I think it wouldn't be really hard to sort of sort those type of things out, the common sense stuff, Maria.
Yeah, the low-hanging fruit, as we say. Absolutely, and I agree. And as we move towards more pressure on the fisheries with deals with Norway and making sure that other boats are not coming in, we need to do. That's why it's incredibly important here in the Parliament that when we are making one deal, we're not jeopardising the livelihoods of another. I completely agree with you.
So before we get on to some other talking points, points here, and as I say, I want listeners to get involved. 086 60 25,000. So I think too, what people struggle with is where decisions are made and how it works, right? So you're going to break it down to simple man terms for me here,
and
right?
if anybody knows the answer, will you please text it?
Text it as soon as you can. No, but so decisions are made in Europe, right? And then they're interpreted, enforced by government, or what way? How does a decision-making Europe end up affecting a person in a European nation?
Yeah, well, from an Irish standpoint,
an example even
about 70% of legislation changes at home in Ireland come from here. So we have our council, our commission, and then our parliament. We're elected officials, 705. The seats will increase. So we briefly mentioned there's whispers Midlands Northwest, which is Galway, Donegal, Mayo, across the Louth will see an extra seat. I certainly welcome that. And the fact that we've probably one of the biggest constituencies in Europe, given we're half the size of the country. So 705 get elected. Our commission, which is where Commissioner McGuinness sits on Ireland's behalf, represents and puts forward a number of work programmes, and they're like the bridge between what we as elected officials here in the Parliament in terms of scrutiny around legislation, what they put forward, and ideas coming in with our own ideas also, and what our communities that we represent want, and then the council, which is where our Taoiseach and Taoiseach and other senior ministers sit and debate and discuss. And then you have within all of that, obviously, civil servants, our diplomats, a number of interest groups, and folks like yourself who are trying to cover and make sure it fundamentally makes sense to the people that's going to be impacting.
Do you think we're vocal enough as a nation at these council meetings in terms of, protecting Irish interests? Sometimes it feels that we want to be good boys and girls, that we don't want to upset the apple cart, that we realise we're a relatively small player. Maybe we don't invoke any vetoes that we may or may not have. Do you know what I mean? I
actually think to that point, I think we're a bit biased here as I represent the country, but
that, yeah.
I think we're incredibly important at the decision making table in terms of bridge building, and as I mentioned, since 73, we have multiple seniors and hopefully more junior workers coming through the institutions that are absolutely impacting the way countries are moving and driving their own growth. And I think people look to Ireland and our leaders to say, in 50 years, look as where this country has gone. When you think our now third country, our divorcee from across the channels has left, and the belief system perhaps when that vote came in 2016, well, Ireland will be next, and we're not. We've stepped into a role of great senior.
It had to be made very difficult for the British to ensure that we didn't see a day like Italy. Probably were watching on with great interest to see how the whole Brexit thing went.
Yeah,
so
but I think the likes
having them queue in a special lane, obviously, at
I think the likes of
and
Hungary
stuff.
and Poland, and we've discussed before too, in terms of this extremism or this pendulum swing that we're seeing right across politics as a whole across the world, not just in Europe. But but to answer your question in terms of us, we're not meek, and we're not shy about making our point heard, and we never. I really believe this. I can say this as a Fine Gael. We never leave a table when decisions need to be made, and I think that's a powerful tool for us.
What was your view? You talked about us being bridge builders, and perhaps it wasn't in this context necessarily. But what was your view? And we talked a little bit about it in the first hour. What was your view in Leo Varadkar, Taoiseach Leo Varadkar said, talking about our neutrality, that we have to look at our neutrality, using words like, we need to stop Putin in his tracks, right? How does that make you feel?
Well, this is where I differ to some of my Fine Gael colleagues. I believe our conversation, we need a conversation around neutrality. I don't think we'll ever change as a country in terms of being a strong defence force.
But what do you mean we need a conversation? Because the way you talked about that, it's almost posed as if we need to talk about, watering down on neutrality. Maybe that's not how you meant it.
No,
I think a lot of the public, a lot of people watching this program, actually want to talk about how do we strengthen our neutrality? How do we actually become politically neutral, perhaps, because I can imagine this scenario where we obviously we're not going to go shaking hands with everyone and do anything inappropriate, right? But I mean, we have the Good Friday agreements coming up for discussion later here. We could say we're a neutral country. We condemn what's happening in Ukraine, but we've seen how things can be brokered. We've got this experience, and actually set ourselves as the peacemakers.
Yeah.
In Europe. But what we're actually
weird.
doing is we're saying Putin must be stopped in his tracks. Now, when Leo Varadkar says that to the rest of Europe, he is speaking for every single person in Ireland. That's what the listener hears. We know differently at home. I just think it's such a lost opportunity. Why are we going down that route? We don't want to be part of a European army. We don't want to get involved in overseas stuff. We want, I think, and recent polls have showed, we want to maintain and even maybe strengthen our neutrality and not have a conversation about how it's watered down.
Well, I believe this is where I believe this conversation needs to go. And again, I only represent myself in this. I don't want to put words in my other Fine Gael colleagues' mouths. We are a small island, the most west periphery of our European Union. We see from the movement online in terms of cybersecurity that we are not at the races when it comes to protecting that island. We see boats off the coast and Air Force off the coast of, particularly in the west where we're from other countries, in particular Russia. And we have not funded the Defence Force, in my belief, for generations to the standard it needs. That if anything was to change tomorrow morning, we do not have enough men and women and others in the positions they need to fulfill the obligations of what they've trained to do in terms of Defence Force. That's not brokering or changing our belief system and our constitutional belief on neutrality.
But there's nothing we could do, or no amount of money we could invest that would offer any resistance if Russia decided to use Ireland as a
but that's a really sad sentiment to say. But the belief system. But I argue that, Greg, with we are a part of a European Union, and if Russia was to invade,
are you in favour of a European army?
No, I wouldn't be. But I also think there's some narrative that often gets put out, particularly by the left, that when we talk about EU army, it's our men and women in the same uniform marching across mainland Europe. And actually, in my eyes, that couldn't be further from the truth. We have to become very sophisticated when it comes to cyber security. We have a number of individuals being trafficked throughout the EU, in Ireland in particular, about 1,000. And we have no way of, in my belief, really seeing the detail of how those individuals, particularly young women and children, being trafficked. We also have a war very close to Europe and our European Union. We have to get really real about that. And we have men and women who have played, to your point earlier, as peacemakers in third countries, and they do a service, and they need to be, in terms of pay remuneration, in terms of retention of staff, in terms of retraining and consistently getting ready for what could come. It doesn't diminish our neutrality, but it certainly makes us, we have to become aware of the fact that we have a war within a very short space of us, and we're seeing the aftermath. So I don't know.
It's complex, and I think the listeners will be able to make up their minds. 086 60 25,000 WhatsApps and texts that number. We're in the company here of MEP Maria Walsh. We've got more guests as well. We'll have more from Maria shortly. We've got more guests on the way as well. So any questions, EU questions, whatever, as I say, I believe the media's responsibility to come out here as well and talk about what happens here and how it impacts us. So that's what we're trying to do. We'll be back after a break with more from the 9 till noon show, or the 10 to 1 show as it's known here in Brussels, and MEP Maria Walsh in just a couple of minutes. Okay, you're very welcome back to the 9 till noon show here on Highland Radio, live from the EU Parliament in Brussels. And we're still in the company here of Maria Walsh, who is MEP for Fine Gael. Did we talk about equality and the hate directive, Maria? Was there something you want to talk to us about that?
Yeah, well, from the pay transparency piece, I just wanted to really share, as we mentioned earlier, the 50 years since we joined the EU in terms of that marriage bar removal, and women really being celebrated for being 50% of our workforce. So as of tomorrow, we will get a final vote on Equal Pay for Equal Work Directive, and that will see things like pay secrecy being removed. So when you see a job being posted, you will see the band of which the pay on offer from that company
will
is going to be listed.
Will that be across the board or just companies of certain size?
It will be across the board. In terms of pay reporting, we will see companies with 250 employees more reporting the differences of pay for the first year, and then it reduces it, what we call a staircase model. And what I'm really encouraging is, while SMEs, our small businesses, and our entrepreneurs are not a part of this directive, I would really encourage, given we are a land of entrepreneurship, that we have small businesses really celebrating that too, because it's important as we scale our businesses also, that we are really at the forefront as a country in our European Union, understanding that equal pay for equal work is absolutely necessary in order for us to look at pension rights.
It's really amazing. I sometimes have these conversations, and I think we've come so far, and then you realise really there's such a distance to go, isn't there?
I mean, and we could pivot to inside 400 odd days, we're going to see local and European elections again. And
Can't wait.
Yeah, look, he's so excited.
No, I do actually. I do enjoy it.
But we'll see local and European elections. We'll see, no doubt, a general election, hopefully after that. And we'll see a referendum on the constitution line in terms of a women's role in the home. Yeah. It's incredibly important that we hear from female voices at a political level, at business level, at community level, and that we really begin to really shift for future generations.
I think we are doing amazing in Donegal, and I hope I'm not doing anyone. I hope I'm not sort of holding any efforts back, other than elected representation. Like, we are doing amazing. I think women are doing amazing things in Donegal in terms of business, business networks. We have our own managing director here, CEO here, Fionnuala Rabbit, head of the Letterkenny Chamber, strong female representation on that. And the list goes on and on and on. The only thing we're missing now is women in the council chamber, which inevitably would bring a different dynamic to the conversation. Or actually diversity, right? Let me spread it out a little bit, because I think any governing institution, if that's what a council is, should, as much as possible, represent the people it makes decisions for. How you know, because you can't talk about people, you have to talk to them. You can't make decisions for people. They have to be part of the decision-making process. And I don't understand how there's some resistance to that.
I know.
People are afraid. I don't know.
I don't know if it's resistance.
There is.
But I don't know if it's resistance within ourselves or within the wider scope. And I say that is, we also have to, as women, make sure we're putting our name forward. Which I have to say.
Well, are you putting your name forward for the next European elections? Have you made a call on that yet?
I'm certainly getting ready for it.
Okay.
But as you often share, it's a long week in politics, so a long year in it too. But
you personally would intend to go again. But obviously, it depends what happens at home too. And if another seat becomes available in Northwest, and then they have to look at it strategically and see where the balance is and all that type of stuff.
And then you got to let the chips fly. But from my side, my team and I are very much
huge team, folks. 40 people.
No, like disinformation.
The amount of money here is crazy.
But to your point, I'm ignoring that.
It's a small team. It's a very small, well-organised team.
To your point, when we look at the need for more supports for our carers in our communities, when you look at the need for more business voices from a female side, or minority groups, as you very kindly shared, in terms of LGBTI community, people of colour, people who weren't born in Ireland but are now calling Ireland home, we need to make sure they're around the table.
And the very simple reason for that, you mentioned carers, right? You can talk about nursing.
Yes.
You can talk about a number of different areas that there are serious issues with, and predominantly it's women that work in these areas. Is it predominantly the right word? I think the majority are, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think...
they're disproportionately affected because of such.
But that's it. And I don't think that's something that can be ignored. And I don't think it's a coincidence then that they're not as... that those areas aren't as much of a focus. So what is life like over here? This would be my worst nightmare. Now, I know people listening will go, oh, well, Maria's well paid and she'll have that pension to work. But let's park that for a second because we're all humans here, right? You know, like I would find it difficult to move away from home. And you've got a great team, don't get me wrong, but there's, you know, that are with you and what have you. But I mean, there comes a point at which I probably wouldn't be terribly comfortable with is where you close the door at night, right? And your family's not around you. Do you know what I mean? Is it tough? Is that part of it? Is that part of it tough?
I think to our chat just now around women in politics, I think this is a real honest conversation where you are you know, a representative and then obviously representing a team and then a constituency. But there's times where I live between cars and airports, which sounds more luxurious than it is, but you are predominantly on your own and making sure that you're covering enough, doing enough. There's always elements of imposter syndrome, or you have pressure from everyone, you know, talking about how tired you look, to you getting weight, to all those gorgeous things that make people. And then to your point, you close the door at night and you're like, wow, my support system is has to be connected to a phone because I don't have them around me. It's a little bit different, obviously, for local and national politicians. For
you
here,
can get home with the weekend.
Yeah, and for here
really,
at Europe,
whatever,
then I mean, I personally split my week in two. You know, I do Thursday to Wednesday, sometimes. Monday to Wednesday, sometimes Thursday here in Brussels, and then Thursday to Sunday anywhere across the 13 counties.
And also,
so you're
to this
constantly on the
city
move.
it's a fine city, don't get me wrong, but I would say there probably are other cities that it might be easier to live on your own in.
It is. I mean, it's a very transient city, you know, but this is in this great big beautiful building is where I often spend most of my time, and things finish and then I head home.
I'm being told, by the way, yesterday by a person that you can actually suggest how much you pay for alcohol here for drinks. You can just
as a pioneer, that wasn't me. I just want to stress that first.
It's funny when you mention pioneer, because you know, you talked about people might comment about your weight, or you might comment about you looking tired. I hate when someone says you look tired because it makes me feel like what's wrong with me, right? But people do then instantly. But even as a non-drinker, you have to explain why you don't drink.
And
you know that it's just a choice I've made all my life. But there are a series of go-to questions that people run through because you have to be able to drink.
I know, and I can't wait for this younger generation that are coming up who don't drink because of health reasons or just because their friends didn't, so they never got into it. I can't wait for that generation to represent Ireland on the international scene because
but young people,
as an old horse, it's like that tired of you're Irish, so you must drink. Well, no, I'm a proud pioneer, and
we try and advocate as much for young people on the show as well. Like the majority of young people don't drink or don't drink very, very heavily as well. And you know, there was that recent conversation of how we were portrayed in America, you know, around the time of the Oscars. And it's just, I'd love to see that broken down a little bit. Speaking of young people, right, we talk from time to time too about exchange programs and that type of stuff that are funded and organised through here. But if there are young people listening, what kind of career opportunities are there in Brussels, and what kind of a background educationally would they require to come here?
Yeah, thanks for giving space to this too. So we have a number of traineeships, both within MEPs' offices, within our political grouping. So as a Fine Gael, I sit within the European People's Party. And then we have the Blue Book traineeships with the Commission and the Council, and they come twice a year. And please contact the office for more specific detail in case my team are probably waving going, you're giving the wrong dates. So I just want to make sure I'm giving right information. And then we have the likes of which St. Columba's College in Stranraer I'll be a part of in Euroscuela, where it giving space to young people to pick a country, debate and discuss, and really hone in on what we call the soft skills that make politics work, and that bridge building mentality that we talked about earlier. So we have multiple programs like that. Blue Flag program for our primary schools, the EPAS schools, so the European Ambassador Schools program for our secondary often TYers there. And then here, I mean, as I mentioned, the Blue Books, there's so many roles here, and we desperately need to recruit. And I know Minister Peter Burke is really looking at this from a job strategy, because when we joined in 73, we have a number of individuals now set to retire, and we need to make sure we have English and Irish speakers coming through, both for translators, so from legal text, as well as interpreters, and making sure that conversation and dialogue happens. So there's multiple. And then you look at the organisations that support or spin-off of the European Union. So, and there's multiple of that in terms of environment, agriculture, fisheries, mental health, social policy. There's so many amazing opportunities.
Right.
And we have a university in Leuven, not too far from here, that a lot of Irish students work with too. So get in touch with any MEP, but particularly my office, and happy to point you in the right way, because as I mentioned, we could be Irish and European, and we need to make sure all the things we talked about here, that we're breaking that disconnect, because we so badly need to make sure we are part of this big family, and we feel part of that family. And it's not just for interrailing or Erasmus Plus, where students are seeing the Europe
I never
that is on their
interrailing. That would just be my worst nightmare. You talked about the Irish language, though, and of course now it has its official recognition. How significant is that finally, Maria?
Huge. And I think for communities that are listening here in Donegal, particularly in Gweedore and in Shown, like, this is a powerful tool to have. I was challenged this past week about why I haven't given a maiden speech in Irish, and I got put to the point where by the end of this mandate I will give. I'm not an Irish fluent speaker, but certainly as an Irish representative I should.
You need to get to Glen Columkill. It worked very well for your colleague Joe McHugh.
Yeah, and he's a phenomenal Irish speaker now.
I don't know. There's something going on there. I don't know how you can learn a language in a couple of weeks.
But
anyway.
here, I think the likes of Colleen Kuhn and the Oscar nom and Irish being here, and
it's cool again too. I think. Or if I don't know. Not sure it ever lost its coolness.
No, it's fabulous.
All right,
and it's great that it's given its stage.
Yeah, excellent.
It's the most important.
Caller says, women face a harder time in politics. I've seen an awful thread on Twitter about female politicians being scandalised for St. Patrick's Day outfits, not one about the men. It ends up taking the focus of what matters. That's a challenge, isn't it?
Yeah.
Let's not talk about what I'm wearing. Let's talk about my feelings and opinions on something.
I mean, I can tell you this, as a young female representative, I've really debated and pushed with my team mental health services across the EU, equal pay for pensions, LGBTIQI plus rights, which are always on the back foot and are being used as a ping pong politically right now, rural, agricultural women who are doing phenomenal work in their communities, and the list goes on and on. If we don't have women here, or other minority representatives, then we're not a true representation of the 500
Caroline
million.
is tapping her watch. And
sorry.
That is a woman I certainly respect greatly. So that'll do for me. MEP Maria Walsh, thanks for giving us an insight into to a life here, to your life here, and some of the work that goes on here. It's been really informative. Caller says, I want to send my children to a Gael school, but I'm afraid I won't be able to support them because I don't have good Irish myself. Well, you know what? That might actually be an interesting feature on the show, separate to what we're doing here, about the practicalities of that, because that's what we try and do. All right, Maria, thank you very much indeed. It is the 9 till noon show here on Highland Radio, live from the EU Parliament in Brussels. If you have any questions, don't forget on the workings of it. Hopefully we're helping you with some answers here, and anything EU related, we'll try and get those answered for you. We've plenty of guests lined up between now and 12, but we'll take a quick break. See you shortly with the weather.
Cutting through the spin. The 9 till noon show on Highland Radio.
All right, let's look at the weather forecast today. Dull, damp and breezy with patches of mist and drizzle. A band of more persistent rain will move up as we head into the afternoon with sunny spells developing in the afternoon. Thundery showers will follow too. There's everything there. I think I'll just leave it at that. It is your typical day in Donegal. We're joined in studio now by MEP Sean Kelly and Colin Markey. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome.
Before we get into the Good Friday Agreement, Sean, just a word on you. It's kind of topical because we've just done it again. I can't remember how long ago it is I talked to you about the clocks going backwards and forwards. Is this still a hobby horse of yours?
It is looking like a hobby horse now.
I don't mean that in a negative way. Either just something that you're...
But firstly, thanks for coming out. It's rarely it happens, and Highland Radio deserve every credit for so doing, trying to bring European issues to their listeners, which we appreciate very much. Clock change was nearly achieved in the last mandate. I was very much involved in it over my time here in Parliament. But some countries didn't agree, and it needed unanimity. One of them was Ireland. They said that if they changed the system here in this Republic, that the Brits mightn't do so, and that we'd have two different timelines in the Ireland of Ireland. So I don't think that was going to be the case, because
they would have followed.
They would have followed,
yeah.
And particularly because in the public consultation done by the Commission, over 83% in the United Kingdom said they wanted clock change to end. So they weren't going to be that pig-headed over Brexit that they just would do the exact opposite to the European Union.
So we're no closer. We were very close, but we're no closer to stopping this back and forward nonsense.
There is some work going on in different countries to see how we could possibly adjust. And definitely we will have to take it on the agenda as soon as the next Parliament is up and running, because trying to do it now with the Parliament elections next year, you just wouldn't achieve it.
Yeah, okay, listen, thanks for that. I was just curious as
Thank
to
you.
how things were moving in that regard. Okay, the Good Friday Conference to mark the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreements taking place in Brussels today. Colin, the significance of this, I mean, obviously we know the significance of the Good Friday Agreement, but why marked here?
Well, I think it's to mark the 25 years of the Good Friday Agreement to start with. I think it's very important that we do, because we all see what the benefits it's brought to Ireland. But I think from a European perspective, Europe has had a very positive impact in terms of the Good Friday Agreement and in terms of, if you like, the island of Ireland over the years. And I think we need to recognise that too. And I think the efforts that have been made at this end to even in Parliament is being opened today by a ceremony to recognise the Good Friday Agreement. It's recognised all across Europe, the impact, the positive impact the Good Friday Agreement has, and it's held up as probably one of the most successful peace agreements across the world, really. And I think we need to recognise that. We need to appreciate the importance that Europe holds it in, you know?
Yeah, and Sean, it's not just recognise it. We need to not forget either. I think sometimes, and maybe a new generation aren't aware of what it was like and what it took to get to where we are now, because sometimes you can take... you could take peace for granted, because we've seen recently now the terror level raised in Northern Ireland. We saw the attack on the RUC officer recently. It doesn't take much for us to return to where we once were.
You're absolutely correct. It's a very fragile process. We've had 25 years of peace. Before that, we had 30 years of terror, and we remember those days. And it took an awful lot to get the peace process up and running. And Colin is right. The role of the US is rightly highlighted, the Irish government, the UK government, but not enough has been said about the role of the EU, who are actually funding peace projects in Northern Ireland since 1989. And they had a crucial role, and they're continuing now the Peace Plus funding of 1.1 billion. And I think the role of the EU is sometimes not appreciated. And also they provided what I would call the diplomatic space, because here in the European Parliament, you had representatives from the different sections in Northern Ireland. You had Ian Paisley, you John Hume and Jim Nicholson. And when they came out here, they were obviously meeting. They wouldn't probably have met too often. And also they were fighting for the same causes. And I think that was actually creating a certain amount of camaraderie between them that otherwise it wouldn't have existed. And without that camaraderie, you probably never have got the Good Friday Agreement. So both in terms of the economic impact and the diplomatic impact, I think the EU played in a very important role.
And obviously, in relation to some of those peace-funded programs, they often have a cross-border, cross-community element to it. There's lots of people listening today that would be involved with or have benefited from them, and those are .eu projects. Colm Markey, there's two panels, isn't there? The first panel, it's a high-level panel, it's been described as, including current political leaders, not Michelle O'Neill, who was due to be here but isn't today for one reason or another. I don't know, by the way. And just really people that were involved in getting the Good Friday Agreement over the line.
Yeah, I think it's people who are involved, but it also focused on the younger generation as well. The like of, for instance, Steve McCurry, who's obviously her father was heavily involved in politics in the North over the years. But I think it's the point that you make. It's important that the next generation recognise as well the impact. Like, I think even just looking back on it from my own perspective, I remember as a kid hearing a rumble, and my mother would take the time with the rumble, and then the news would come on and say that was a bomb in Uri or something like that. So this is very real for one generation, but for the next generation it may not be. And it's important that young people engage in the importance of it as well, because if we don't lose sight of it, people will forget.
And do you know, the funny thing is, and I don't mean it in that way, Derry Girls probably has done more to educate a generation about the troubles than perhaps maybe schools or politicians or media have done. It's quite interesting, I think, that. What are you looking forward to in the first panel, Sean? And I mean, obviously, you know, if you're going to talk about something, you want to speak to people with influence, people that understand what they're talking about, so it should be good.
It should be very good. We have a great panel. Robbie Butler, the Deputy Leader of the UUP, Caoimhe Archibald from Sinn Féin MLA, Senator Ian McCurry, as Colin mentioned, and Ambassador Lindsay Crosdale Appleby from British Ambassador to the EU. So we will be discussing the historical background, but more importantly, how we can maintain this into the future, and above all, looking at, I think, asking them, how can the Assembly be guaranteed to function into the future? This on-off cannot continue, and particularly...
particularly for the people.
Particularly for the people,
you know, whatever about the politics, and you know, there are really big decisions that need to be made.
Absolutely.
They're not being made.
If you elect people to an assembly, you expect the assembly to be up and running. If you elect people to the Dáil, you expect them to form a government. And I think we will be looking at the Windsor framework. Will it be able to establish enough stability in Northern Ireland so that all the parties can commit to forming an assembly after each election? That would guarantee hugely continuity and stability in Northern Ireland. And of course, they would also be in a position to influence what's been happening in relation to EU law and UK law into the future. But if they're not up and running, obviously, then they don't have any say. So,
yeah, okay. And you're of the same view, Colm?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have to get the Assembly back up and running. I think that's vital. And I think it leaves a vacuum when it's not there. You would have thought with the agreement, with the Windsor Agreement in place, that perhaps that would create the opportunity. But clearly, there's politics in that too. And I suppose that's the bridge we have to cross. But the more communication, the more events like this that recognise the importance of the Good Friday Agreement and the importance of the Assembly, I think the more hopefully we can put a focus on getting it back.
MEP Sean Kelly, you have to take your leave of us now. You've another appointment. Colm, you've kindly said you'll wait a little after the 11 o'clock news. So what we do have to do is take a break as we head towards that news, and we'll be back with more in a few moments. 11 o'clock. It's time for us to get a news update, and it's back over to Michaela Clark.
Go.
And you're very welcome back to the programme. 3 minutes past 11 in Ireland. It's 3 minutes past 12 here as we broadcast live from the EU Parliament in Brussels. Again, if you have any questions or comments, we want to hear from you. All the usual channels are open to you. 086 60 25,000. WhatsApps and texts. So give us a call on 074 91 25,000. Emails to comments at highlandradio.com. And of course, you can continue to watch the programme on our website, highlandradio.com, watch live. Or you can go to our YouTube or Facebook channels. We are there, and you'll be able to see Mr. MEP, shall I say, Colin Markey, who continues to join with us. And I think, too, we were talking about the Good Friday Agreement before we took the news. And, you know, I mean, it is it's you talked about its recognition in Europe, but it's still looked on from around the world as a pathway to peace in different parts of the world, a mechanism that can be employed. Like, there are lessons still being learned from that peace and how it was brokered.
Oh, absolutely. And I think many people will look at the example that Northern Ireland was, and indeed the personalities that were involved in different ways and the different institutions that were set up and the structure of how it was all brought together. But ultimately, at the back of it all was plenty of dialogue and different structures for dialogue, and to continue that different forms of dialogue. If you look at, like, you have the Northern Ireland Assembly, you have the North-South Ministerial Council, you have the British-Irish Council, and then you have engagement here at European level as well. And even in the time post-Brexit, one of the big focuses we've had a conversation about around here in the Parliament, myself and Sean both sit on a EU-UK interparliamentary body, and how we ensure the voice of Northern Ireland is heard in that body, because currently there's only one voice, and that represents one of the communities in Northern Ireland on that body. So we want to ensure that the Northern Ireland voice as a whole continues to be part of the conversation, because it's very important.
And I can understand, maybe, is it frustration or what have you heard Sean referencing and you referencing, that often when we talk about the players in it, the role of the EU is not top of the list there, is it, if it's on the list at all?
Well, like I suppose the other great peace project that we all talk about is Europe as a whole, because Europe has brought, if you take Germany and France, Europe brought Germany and France together, whereas previously there was 2 wars in Europe. And similarly in an Irish context, it brought all the people on the island of Ireland together in Europe. Sadly, Britain has left due to Brexit, but it still brought the likes of Ian Paisley, the like of John Hume, and all these characters together where they engaged to try and progress many issues. And they had issues in common when they came to Europe. And that was the difference. And if you look at even the like of the Single Market Act in 1992, that removed the customs checkpoints on the border. So many things, many influence that Europe had. And then the other key one, obviously, is the different funds and the different investments that peace brought in Northern Ireland, that the funding followed the peace. And I think where we're at now is with Brexit and with the unique status that Northern Ireland has, if you like, the Good Friday Agreement brought peace, but this now, the status Northern Ireland has can bring prosperity, and people need to grasp that nettle.
I mean, there's no doubt that Ireland did benefit from EU monies. Anyone driving on many of the roads will see the signs and other projects, but we're contributors now to the EU, aren't you? The days of us receiving cash from the EU are over.
They're not over. We contribute more than we receive.
We're net contributors.
But we still receive in many, many ways. So there's still a number of, plenty of opportunities for people to access grants. But certainly on the overall of it, we're net contributors. But we do benefit, like access to a market of 450 million people. And you only have to look at the Irish situation. If you look at Irish exports, we're particularly dependent on the UK, if you go back 15 or 20 years ago. Now, a third of our exports are to Europe, at the continent of Europe.
And the more you can spread the exports across different markets, the better it is.
Absolutely.
That's not to say that, to have a strong, good relationship with Britain is very important, but
Absolutely,
you don't want to be over-reliant on any particular market.
But really, you're looking at a market with Britain through Brexit. You're looking at a third of the market in Europe through the common market, and you're looking at trade deals that Europe does around the world that we get access to the rest of the world too. So being part of a big bloc gives us influence that we wouldn't have as a small country.
You are contesting the next elections.
Oh,
that's your
absolutely.
intention. What do you think the talking points would be? I think it's going to be around EU armies, fishing, farming. I can think of another couple, but I think that's really what the public...
Three good ones to start there.
Yeah, but I think that's what the public are going to want to talk to you about.
Yeah.
And I have a sense that even in the short term since the last elections, I think the Irish public were more inquisitive, more critical thinking, and I think it's going to be a very interesting election campaign, an EU election campaign.
I think certainly those 3 issues for a start are going to be front and central. I think if you take the like of the war in Ukraine, and then that brings into context the Irish neutrality situation, and I think like in many ways Europe will have to respond, if nothing else, in a defensive way to protect it.
When you say Europe, you mean including Ireland?
I mean including Ireland. And
what do you think our role should be as an individual? I'm not asking you to talk about each Fine Gael policy per se, but what do you believe Ireland should be doing? What do you believe our stance on because we talked about your party colleagues want a conversation on neutrality, but you as an individual, what do you think Ireland's role is in the EU in that context? Well,
I think we've a role that can sit with our neutrality around cyber security. I think if
what
you
does that mean? I heard Maria Walsh reference that as well. Okay, so it's obviously something that you're talking about being briefed on. What do you mean by that?
I mean that if you look at the capability both in civic society and in our own army in relation to cyber security, we have a considerable contribution to make. Estonia is the European headquarters of cyber security, and outside of Estonia, Ireland probably is the other area where we have, with all the foreign direct investment in the IT sector over the last 20 years, we have the capability in society. But also, if you look back, I think it was the year before last, the Irish Army took part in exercises at European level where there was a challenge put to them to solve a cyber security issue. And it was the Irish were the only ones that got to the bottom of it and solved the problem. So if you look at it in an Irish context, we don't have the military hardware. We don't
I don't want to be negative,
to
but we have the dolls full of Chinese-made cameras. All the TDs have TikTok on their government phones. Seriously, are you sitting here with a straight face telling me we're at the forefront in terms of cybersecurity?
Well, if you look at the exercise that the Army took part in, they came
That's
up top
one
on
thing,
it.
yeah. But you recognise my points, do you?
I think
You acknowledge my
I
points?
absolutely.
Okay.
Like I'm the very one that came out and said that we should be taking TikTok off the phones, off government phones, because I think we have to be conscious of cybersecurity from a Chinese perspective.
Spies in the doll?
I wouldn't say spies in the doll, but you can never be too careful. You can never be too careful about these things.
No, but I mean, there have been stories of.
But see, the thing about the whole situation as regards, let's say, the Chinese influence, on any of the Chinese companies, there's a, if you like, there's a Communist Party have an influence. They sit on boards, and so it's also part of the legislation in China that the government is entitled to go in and access data. So we have to be sure that the data we have that is owned by Chinese companies, that it is safe.
A caller says, I'm a pensioner and Europe seems to be promoting digital. Everything's digital. Support should be given to those who are older as well. We can contribute, but we are being excluded. I mean, we have to make sure we leave in our fight to progress that we leave no one behind. I think that's a really strong point.
I think that's a very important point. And I ran a fintech conference in the autumn in Dundalk, and one of the issues we brought up about was that digital divide, if you like. That technologies are great for people who are IT savvy, but we have to ensure that the ordinary services that are available for people, be it through the post office or be it through your local bank, which obviously
access to cash,
they have to continue. And I think
it'd be nice to see the GEA take cash on the gates again, wouldn't it?
Well, it would be nice. I think it's symbolic if you're not prepared to, like, it is discriminating.
I'd love
people.
to see that called out a bit more from politicians.
Yeah, no, I know should that. I think it is something it's so important because it's easy to facilitate those who are the next generation with all the tech savvy ideas. But we have to, as you say, leave nobody behind and make sure.
Because you see, the thing is like we're talking one generation or two generations. Naturally, people will move towards. We shouldn't try and force or coerce anyone to do so. I think it's going to happen naturally. Do you have any thoughts on the bringing of EU languages into schools? Asked the listener. They have their view that it will dilute the Irish language further, in my opinion. Or in their opinion, sorry.
I think we have European languages in schools, and I think the general recognition is that if you learn one language, it makes other languages easier to learn. So I think one language isn't...
It's a little bit like algebra. There's this conversation that, people learn algebra and you never get to use it, but by learning algebra, you learn learning.
Yes, and
so
I think you learn how to learn a language.
It's not its usefulness, it's actually almost sometimes what you achieve. A caller says, we are Irish, I don't know why I banged the desk. We are Irish, not European. We have lost more to Europe than we ever got at this stage. Fishing, banking, bailout, etc. Remember your roots and what our people fought and died for. Are you Irish or European or both? Are you Irish first, European second, European first, Irish second?
Oh, absolutely. I'm Irish first and European second. And just what that person mentions about the fisheries, I've worked very hard over the last 12 or 18 months in relation to fisheries and protecting the Irish box from Norwegian fishermen. And we have got an agreement in the last number of weeks which excludes Norwegian fishermen out of the Irish box for the fishing and blue whiting, which is the first time something like that has been achieved in 40 years. So I would say, as regards being Irish first, absolutely. That's why I prioritise that the Irish box should be excluded from Norwegian fishermen, but also that agreement was on the basis of protecting Irish interests over other European country interests.
It's been lovely having you in. You're attending or speaking at the conference this afternoon?
I'll be attending the conference. The speaker lineup is there already. But
okay, no, I don't have access to that. I wasn't trying to gazump you or anything like that. Not gazump you, but no, that's perfectly fine. You'll be able to take it all in. Right, okay. MEP Colin Markey, thank you very much for joining us. I really do appreciate your time. We also heard from MEP Sean Kelly. Right, okay. Keep your calls, comments coming into us. 086 60 25,000. That's the WhatsApp and text number, or call 07491 25,000. We are broadcasting live today, by the way, from the EU Parliament in Brussels. And it is just an opportunity maybe to come out here, speak to the people that work out here on your behalf, or some would say claim to, but I'm sure they do work very, very hard, and to maybe give you an insight into what goes on here. Now, it may make you feel... your eyes might be opened in a positive way, or it might be opened in a negative way. I don't know, and it's not for me to judge. try and get the information out there and see how we get on. All right, okay, let us take a break, and we'll be back with more on this special 9 till noon show in just a few moments. Take care. Okay, the time is 17 minutes past 11 in Ireland, 17 minutes past 12 here in Brussels. And alongside me here in studio today, is Owen McColgan, who's a policy consultant at Technopolis Group, or with the Technopolis Group, right? From Fawn, been here almost 2 years. What took you out to Brussels? If you say an airplane, I'm just going to throw you out the door. No, but why did you decide to come work here?
I kind of always wanted to move away for a while.
Yeah.
But also just with the job that I wanted to get into, Brussels is the best for it. It's one of the biggest in the world, the Commission, with the amount of policies they bring out. So yeah, that was my main reason for coming over.
So what did you study? What did you qualify with that sort of gave you the options here?
I studied math and economics as my undergrad, and then I went on to study, I've done a master's in economics then, which gave me the foundation to get out here.
Now talk to me about the different groups, right? What's the Technopolis Group?
The Technopolis Group, it's a consultancy it came from the UK, started originally in Brighton, I think, and eventually we are evaluators, so to speak. So we just evaluate policy, give our advice, kind of, and then so we started in Brighton, and then they've moved all across Europe, and then we're in Brussels now, and we mainly work with innovation policy and technology, which is it's kind of cool. I find it really interesting.
Yeah, and do you stress test stuff? Is that part of it? It's not maybe the right phrase, but I mean, I might come up with a great idea, right? And I think it'll change the world, but you have to give me a reality check,
exactly,
perhaps.
Yeah. So what happened with that is that the Commission or the Parliament, whoever, will put out these tenders for a study. So then we write our proposal, send it off to them. They think we're good enough to do the study. We'll do it. So we'll study just what's going to happen, really. We try to predict. Or sometimes we evaluate as well. So we look back at other policies and see how they're getting on, see if they're any good or not, and see how they could improve for the next time.
How do we make sure that the Commission doesn't cherry pick the companies that do its work for them, that maybe we know that Owen and the rest of the Technopolis Group are kind of favourable in a particular area? Because you are independent, but are there checks and balances? I'm not for a moment suggesting you're not independent, but just curious as to what is the checks and balances there? Are they closed tenders? Or what?
No, they're open tenders.
So closed in terms of... Okay, go ahead, yes.
Well, you could apply if you wanted, but you mightn't get too far. But
I know for a fact I wouldn't, but go ahead.
But yeah, so the open tenders, anybody could apply, and they have different criteria. So they evaluate who, like your team, the team's going to be involved, like their level of seniority. There's also your methodologies, so how you're going to go about evaluating this. And then, I think the most important thing is to be an independent evaluator, which is what we... pride ourselves on.
Exactly, and that's what I was going to say. That is something that you wear as a badge. And you work hard to earn that reputation, and you want to maintain it. And you personally, we'll talk a little bit about your work, but obviously, we're a long way from Fawn, beautiful part of the world, lovely bridge. But this is very different here, isn't it? This is incredibly cosmopolitan, but you sought that out, really, didn't you, as well? That's what you wanted.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's Fawn's the village, and it's a beautiful village. I love it. It's where I'm from. But this is a big city full of ever-changing people, so it's not that big of a city, which is nice. It'd be the same size as Dublin, which has kind of drawn me to it, and it's much easier to get around.
It's a bit better laid out, better transport connections.
Exactly. So that's what drew me to it, and there's also it's a young city as well. There's a lot of young people here.
And easy access home, presumably.
Yeah, exactly. It's apart from getting up to Donegal, but to Dublin it's an hour and a half.
You haven't figured that one out yet. We might get you working on that one.
Flying to Belfast soon.
Yeah, indeed. But I mean, it's also the option, and once you're on home soil, to Fawn, it's probably 3 or 4 hours. Actually, it's 3 for me in the south of the county. Right. So, what area are you working on, particularly at the moment? You says that has an interest for you.
At the minute, I'm kind of in the quantity team, so I'm just in anything really. But an interesting project that I really done recently was it was a study to see if they could get what would be the effects of bringing a genetically modified organisms into the European market, into the plants, just to see how would it be environmentally beneficial, would it have a good impact on the economy and stuff like that there, which is a very interesting project we've done recently. One that I'm currently, the one that I first started off with is called International Cities Challenge. Derry was actually in it. So they basically get this group of 100 cities all together, and then they get them to all work together, have some synergies, and to implement these different policies that are like digital transitions and green transitions and stuff like that.
Presumably seeing how that, because a lot of as soon as you talk about green agendas, climate agendas, transit, it's always portrayed as negative, and that's the one thing that's always frustrated me at home. Is the messaging, and this is not something you're responsible for, but rather than all it being about what we're going to lose, what we're going to take, how much it's going to cost, to talk about job creation, the dividends from that. And I just wonder why. I scream at the politicians in my head, wondering why are you not messaging this differently? Why aren't you talking about the positives? The you know what I mean? Because if you don't talk about them, people believe there aren't any there, and that vacuum is filled by a lot of it's project fear too.
Yeah, you're dead right, because there is a lot of huge benefits that come out of this. One of them was to improve your infrastructure, to improve your transport infrastructure, which would be great in Donegal. And there's also other ones, a lot of to do with green as well, which is very interesting. You can make these whole big wildlife reserves and stuff like that, which is really, they're really interesting.
In terms of technology, you mentioned a particular interest in that. Is that last project you're talking about, or what other areas within that? I have to mute myself because I don't want everyone to think I'm talking about it all the time, but AI and where we're going with that, I don't know what your role might be in that, but I think it's going to have huge ramifications in education, on jobs, on social discourse, on interactions online. I was speaking to a politician recently, and I can see in very short amount of time conversations happening as to whether or not they wrote it themselves or if they put it into a chat model or what have you, and then we're going to have it integrated into our emails, integrated into our search engines, and it's all happening at breakneck speed.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think that what they're trying to do now is I think there should be an AI regulation coming out soon, if I'm right. But I think that what's going to happen a lot is that it's just going to automize a lot of your job. I hope it doesn't take any jobs now, but it's just, I think a lot of it's just going to write your email for you, easy reply.
Well, I'm rewriting my CV. Camilla Cole says, as a young person looking to move abroad, what's it costs like living in Brussels?
To be honest, it's getting a small bit more expensive, because just because of rent, really.
Tax is really high. You can go to a doctor,
or if you work for the parliament, you only don't get as much tax either.
Right. Okay.
But it's really cheap.
But you get something for your taxes, don't you? In terms of access to dental, access to healthcare. I think even if you're working and paying your tax, and your child becomes sick, they'll provide a nanny, for want of a better word, that will come in for 72 hours to care for your child whilst you can continue to go to work. Maybe higher tax wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if you're getting those types of services.
No, you get great transport, and well, you still need to, but it's only €15 a month then for your health or whatever. But it's cheaper than Dublin, I must say now, and it's not the most expensive city, but it's definitely not as cheap as more southern Mediterranean kind of areas. But I mean, like, to be honest, I pay about $7.40 on rent, so it's
a month.
Yeah,
and that I think that includes some services,
I live
doesn't
by
it?
myself though, which is
$7.40 includes some services, doesn't it? Yeah, which it wouldn't. It wouldn't
exactly.
hold. Right. Okay. Listen, it's been great to get an insight into what you're doing over here, Owen, and to sort of recognise that there are people outside of elected politics that are living and working here. It's fascinating stuff. All right, Owen McColgan from Fawn, but now a policy consultant at Technopolis Group. Did I get it right that time?
Technopolis.
You know what? Technopolis. All right. Listen, great to have you, and thanks for calling in. We'll be back with more in the 9 till noon show after the break. Do you currently? Okay, you're very welcome back to the last half hour of the 9 till noon show, and we're joined by a number of guests here now who are in Ireland. So I've flown to Brussels to speak to people in Ireland on Zoom. I think it's fantastic. Fiona Truelove is from Europe Direct in Letterkenny and joins us. Good morning to you, Fiona.
Good morning, Greg. How are you?
Fantastic. It's great to have you with us. Right. Okay. What is the role of the Europe Direct in Letterkenny?
Well, we offer information on the European Union. There are 8 information points throughout Ireland, whereas Donegal has 1. In fact, we have 2 because our Gweedore Library will offer services through the Irish language, which is great.
So talk to me a little bit more about the services you provide.
Okay, so we offer information on the European Union to citizens, and that can answer general queries. That can be anything from traveling in Europe to study in Europe. Recently, we have had some legal issues and also some tax matters.
And
Now,
Fiona, is it difficult to get the message out that you are there to answer those queries? Do you find that you having people are almost stumbling across you accidentally, or there will be others like a TD or a councillor that ends up signposting it to you? Is that part of your challenge? You're sitting there with this wealth of information and support. It's just letting people know that Europe Direct is in Letterkenny.
That is one of our main concerns. Now, we're very lucky. We hold we have in local papers monthly ads, and we have quite a good social media. And also, because we're part of the library and Donegal County Council, it does to be out there. But if people don't realise we're here, and when they come in, they cannot believe the amount of things we do. Now, we're very lucky to hold events and promotional evenings to say we're here. But yes, getting people in the doors is the biggest challenge for us.
And what about working with schools? Because, I mean, that's a great place to sort of start to get the message out. And we've kind of had a couple of calls from people when we were speaking to our last guest there, talking about, you know, I would like maybe to pursue a career in Europe or Brussels or what have you. You know what I mean? So are you in schools offering information there?
Absolutely. We have some schools ambassadors for the European Commission. We're actually in Donegal, Errigal College is one of them, but we hold many different workshops, whether it's climate change, biodiversity, to get the schools in through the doors. But also, it is just so important to get our message across to the young people and to let people know we're there. I've been very lucky. I've had a couple of students recently who are interested in internships in Brussels, and I've been helping them liaise with people who's already done them. So you'd be surprised that I've been here or in Central Library, I would say, for about 12 years. So I've built up a great bank of contacts, and it's people can come in and ask anything, and that's one of them: how to work in Europe.
Hey, Fiona, here's the thing too. Get your wallet out, get onto the sales team at Highland Radio. You've got 8 out, hold on, I'm not finished. We've got 8 out of 10 ears in the county listening to us, all right? So that's another thing we can do. Did I hear you've had famous visitors recently?
Well, famous or influential, depending on what way you're looking at it. We've had MEPs come and support us all the time, which is great. We've had Chris McManus and Maria Walsh. Good. But sometimes, I mean, last summer we had, and I always say her name wrong, so I do apologise, Miriam McCulleys from the Harry Potter. So she was visiting Donegal.
Lovely.
And she just popped in because she loved libraries. And our manager, Una, was able to take her around, showed her our local studies, but also showed her the Europe Direct information point. And again, amazed how a library in what she felt a relatively small town could have such an influence for people.
I mean, libraries are a great thing, I think. And do you know what the funny thing is, and it came back into focus, was around the time of the you-know-what, when access to libraries were restricted. And I think really it was an opportunity for us to recognise the work that the likes of you and your colleagues do in there. Fiona, it's been lovely speaking to you. We'll speak again on the programme, by the way, because, you know, we're here to sort of try and get the message out.
Listen, you shouldn't open that invitation. We'll be on every week.
I'm almost sure I've extended it to you before, Fiona, so the ball's in your court. Listen, I jest. Lovely to speak to you, and have a great day. What's the weather like in Letterkenny? Because over here in Brussels, the sun is splitting the rocks.
I'm going to look out the window. It's raining, so you're rubbing salt into the wounds now, Greg.
Unfortunately, I'm a terrible liar because it's the exact same weather here as you have there. Fiona, have a lovely day. It's been lovely speaking to you.
Thank you,
Greg. Joy Brown's Economic Development, or with the Economic Development Unit of Donegal County Council, joins us. Oh, by the way, before I go, sorry, Fiona, you're still there, are you? Before we chuck you out.
Oh, I'm still here.
Just give us your social media stuff. Sorry, by the way, just in case people are.
So you can get us on Facebook at Europe Direct Letterkenny, or on Twitter at EDIC Donegal, or basically just come into Central Library or give us a ring. We're just central to the town.
Lovely stuff. Thanks very much again, Fiona. So Joy Brown, Economic Development Unit of Donegal County Council. Hiya, Joy. Are you there, Joy? Are you muted? I wonder.
Yes, I'm here, Greg. Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me on the show.
Were you muted, Joy? I couldn't see you. Were you muted?
I was muted. I think it's
There's one every day. There's one every day. Joy, come here. It's a joy to speak to you. You probably saw that one coming. Talk to me about the EU's role or in the Economic Development Unit or the Economic Development's role in the EU. Explain to me your functions there.
Yeah. Absolutely, Greg, and thanks for having me on. So I work in what's called the Strategic Funding Unit within Donegal County Council's Economic Development Directorate, and our role is to essentially seek EU funding primarily to deliver projects that fit within our corporate objectives and funding that we might not otherwise have access to. So we work with networks, we work with the Irish Regions European Office there in Brussels, Regional Assembly, and we're also members of the Assembly of European Regions and the CPMR. So our role is to connect people, to help develop partnerships, and then to apply for funding through a variety of programs in the EU. So there's quite a lot there in terms of opportunities for Donegal.
Yeah, now your connection is hanging by a thread, but we can hear you and we'll continue. When we talk about applying for EU funding, who qualifies to be able to apply for EU funding? Like I, as an individual, might have a great idea, could I? Or is it a play group or a sports group or, I don't know, someone interested in bringing communities together? So can you talk to me a little bit about who qualifies to apply for funding?
Yeah, so I suppose that depends on a number of things. It depends on the program that you're applying for, and it depends on the type of project that you're seeking to deliver. So most of the programs would be led by consortiums. So that would be groups of partners and different stakeholders. So you might have educational bodies, you might have public bodies, you would have funding opportunities. For example, you have there the Brexit Enterprise Blue Economy Enterprise Development Scheme that's run by BIM, and that's open to businesses to apply for that. That's part of the Brexit Adjustment Reserve Fund. So essentially applying for funding depends, as I say, on the program that you're applying for. But if anyone has queries in relation to that or is looking to develop a project idea, of course, the Strategic Funding Unit and other, I suppose, departments within the council are available to assist and advise on that as well.
Yeah, and I suppose sometimes we don't do enough of that, just ringing up and talking, be it your office, the Leo office, the investment offices. Do you know what I mean? There's teams and people there that are available to offer advice or even just to clarify things. Right, hopefully you can still hear me. I'll stick to one more question. You can, you're back there properly. What's this Youthopia event taking place next month, 5 days after my birthday, the 27th of April, just to let everybody know? Youthopia. Right, I think we've kind of...
Yes.
Yeah, you're back. You are. Youthopia. Talk to me about Youthopia.
I'm back. Apologies, Greg.
It's okay. It's okay. We won't hold you much longer.
It's a little bit unstable. But yeah, so Youthopia is an exciting, again, an EU-funded event that we're hosting in Donegal. It's at Oakfield Park on the 27th of April. And Youthopia is essentially a one-day conference that brings young people together to discuss a variety of topics through workshops, through keynote speakers, the issues that matter to them, such as climate, such as social inclusion, careers, and I suppose future skills and development. So Youthopia is open to everyone, and registration is actually available now on donegal.ie/Youthopia.
Lovely stuff. Thank you very much for that. And delighted to welcome back onto the show Kasia Kujaya. Good morning to you. You always bring a bit of joy to the programme. Good to have you with us, Kasia.
Good morning, Greg. Good morning, Donegal. How are you feeling today?
Fantastic. Talk about taking on the assignment well. Thank you so much, Kasia. You are the Youth Information Officer with the Donegal Youth Service and Eurodesk Ambassador. We often speak to you about the Youth Exchange Programme, the Erasmus Plus, and I think I kind of almost sense, in a very positive way, a frustration with you that there's some brilliant opportunities here, folks. Please come and engage with us and grow with some of these projects. Is that fair enough assessment, Kasia?
Absolutely, yes, and especially after pandemic, it is so hard to get back to, normal situation, to get young people be involved in different projects again. So I have to admit that I'm very happy with cooperation that we have with Letterkenny Europe Direct Center, because we very often produce events together, and we're trying to support each other in this case. Yes.
So where can people get more information on Erasmus Plus, the youth exchange program, studying abroad? Because, I mean, we've talked about this a lot, and we will when we have a bit more time again. Of course, Kasia, you'll know when's a good time to contact us to speak again. But where can people get more information? Because I've got a lot of messages of people that their appetite is being whet for a European adventure. And I think yours is a good office to contact if you're a younger person.
Absolutely, yes. If you are aged between 13 up to 30 years old, you're more than welcome to visit Letterkenny Youth Information Centre, which is part of Donegal Youth Service. We're based on Port Road, so it's like the opposite side of the old grill. And we're open every day, Monday to Friday, 12 to 6. And the best person to get is myself. I'm the person responsible for coordinating the European Solidarity Corps, which is like a volunteering project for young people. I'm also responsible, actually, we're organizing at the moment the youth exchange under Erasmus Plus with our amazing Polish partner. So the group of young people from Ireland will be going to Poland for 1 week, and in return, the Polish people will visit us in Donegal. So it will be exciting times. Basically, whatever the question is, you ask me, and if I don't know the answer, I will find the answer.
All right, Kasia, have a lovely day. Thank you so much for your time this morning. It's greatly appreciated. That is Kasia Kuja, who's on her way now into the Youth Information, the Donegal Youth Service, I'd imagine. She's also the Eurodesk Ambassador and Youth Information Officer. Have a lovely day. I'm correct there? I hope I am, anyway. Okay, thank you very much, Kasia. Right, we have more guests on the way, but let's take a quick break. We'll be back shortly. Okay, let's get the weather forecast for you. You know what? I might have to come back to the weather forecast in a moment because I should have had it open, but I didn't. Oh, we have it here. Right, let's see what's going to happen for this afternoon then. A band of more persistent rain will move up as we head into the afternoon, while sunny spells will develop in the afternoon. Thundery showers will follow too, with possible spot flooding and isolated thunderstorms. Blustery with fresh and gusty southwest winds, strong at times in the west. Another mild day with highest temperatures of 13 to 15 degrees. So we're joined in studio now by Trevor McCallion, teacher at Carndonagh Community School in Donegal, and students Roisin Farron, the Donegal Youth Council rep with the school, and Luke McLaughlin. All three of you, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Trevor, how many have you come over with?
We have 26 students and 4 staff.
And how long are you here for?
We came on Monday and we're flying out this evening.
All right, and what's the experience been like?
Brilliant.
Yeah,
Very good.
Talk to us about some of the things you've done.
Well, we've been to heaps. We've been to a war memorial. We've been at a chocolate factory yesterday. We did a tour of Belgium itself. We've been to the Natural Science Museum. And then this morning, we've been to the Parliamentarian, and we've been just had a talk from Luke Flanagan, who we'd like to thank for inviting us here. And the rest of the group now is actually having a tour throughout the European Parliament.
Luke McLaughlin, you have an interest in politics, so I mean, what a fantastic opportunity for you this is.
Yeah, it's very exciting. I'm glad to have this opportunity to be here. I've seen a lot of, heard a lot as well, and very interesting.
Has it further encouraged you, or has it discouraged you in pursuing politics, I wonder?
Well, yeah, it's very interesting, and I'm thinking about it. Yeah, I'm still deciding. I'm still young.
Yeah, for sure. Exactly, and don't pigeonhole yourself yet. You don't know what you might do. But could you imagine yourself maybe studying economics and history or something and working behind the scenes in politics, or could you imagine yourself maybe in elected politics, or what?
Yeah, I do enjoy economics and history. I could see myself doing that. Yeah, I like public speaking as well, so I could see myself in the elected form as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And do you feel that you've got opinions, you've got views that maybe are more representative of the young people, and that you could be in a good position to go in there and start making some inroads?
Yeah, I could. I like listening to other people's suggestions as well, and I could bring those forward too.
Well, you need to get rid of that. Listening to other people's suggestions. Just be
Yeah.
single-minded and dogged.
Yeah.
No, I just maintain that it's really important. I'll come back to you. Roisin Farren, you're on the Youth Council. How's the Youth Council experience been for you?
Oh, the Youth Council is brilliant. It's definitely such an interesting experience, especially definitely getting your voice across and subjects that will actually make a change.
Yeah, and it is a meaningful thing, isn't it? I'll be honest with you, when it first started, I maybe was a bit cynical about it, you know what I mean? But the views are listened to, and you do feel you have an input, and there is two-way street in that conversation, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely. There's a great connection between our youth council and the actual Donegal county council. Our opinions are definitely listened to, and we're definitely heard.
Yeah, what have you enjoyed most about this trip?
Oh, this trip,
Yeah.
I've definitely loved walking around the Grand Palace. It was brilliant. We had a tour, and we could see all the details and all the buildings. It was really interesting.
Was Brussels what you expected it to be? I mean, obviously, before we travel anywhere, and if you haven't been here before, you Google and you search and you try and, Street View and all that kind of stuff. I'm not sure if you did that, but did it match your expectations?
Oh, no, it's definitely a lot more brilliant and beautiful than I thought. I didn't really Google anything, but it is definitely a really beautiful city.
Could you see yourself living in a city like this?
I could definitely see myself living. Everything's just so close together. It's
Yeah.
really beautiful, yeah.
As is Carndonagh and surrounds, of course, but a bit of travel, there's no harm in a bit of travel. Trevor, is it, personal growth and what have you?
Yes.
We'd like people, if they want to do things because they want to and not feel compelled to do so.
Yes, if they wish to work abroad, that they have the choice whether to work in Ireland or go abroad. Just on with Brussels yesterday, the group actually put 24,000 steps in, so they got a good viewing of Brussels
Wow.
yesterday. And
Okay.
I just want to pay tribute to all the students that we took with us. They've been very good, and their families at home, the school at home, should be very proud of how they conducted themselves.
A listener wants to know from either, I'll ask you, Luke, actually, and maybe get Roisin's view. A listener says, can you ask the young people if they feel overlooked? So much chopping and changing with the school curriculum, especially after their experience with COVID. I mean, the Department of Education would say that they do consult now more with students than they ever did, but do you get a sense that people are making decisions for you without consulting you? Roisin, you look keen to answer this one.
Oh, I'm definitely keen to answer this one. I was, me and two other students from Cairn attended a student voice meeting down in Portlaoise. It was really a big constructive project, and there was lots of groups and lots of meetings, and we definitely got our input in, and it was basically all the same things, and
Yeah, and I think the department has to listen, because I mean we had this unexplainable, because no one recommended it, adjustment to the leaving cert cycle, which would have brought some of the exams towards the end of fifth year, and then it would have complicated transition for some. They rolled back on that, but I don't think that decision would have ever been made with proper consultation to begin with.
One of the main topics we did talk about at that student voicing was the Leaving Cert and how they're trying to make the transition from the junior cycle into the Leaving Certificate more like easy or like more smooth. Definitely the Leaving Cert is very like old fashioned or like it's very set in its ways. Needs definitely a change.
Luke, just to the listener's question, do you feel you're being overlooked? Do you feel you're being ignored in life?
Well, I think there's some that think that young people, they wouldn't have experienced as much as older people, and they might not like take on our views as much as they would in adults. But there's some who want to hear young people's voices, and of course we do as well, being young people who want to be heard and our opinions.
We've council, European and general elections all coming up in the next few years. You'll probably be over 18 at that point, I would guess. I haven't a clue, but I'd guess. But what's your view first, Roisin, in terms of the voting age being reduced to 16? On all elections, some elections or none?
I definitely think I like the voting age of 18. I think it's a good like standard age for everything. But yeah, I definitely think maybe they should take young people's experience and views into account of voting as well. But I'm not really sure, if I'm being honest. I like the 18 age.
Yeah, what about you, Luke?
Yeah, the 18 age is a good age as well. Some people who are younger might not be as mature, and they
can't believe I'm hearing this from young people.
Yeah. So I think the 18
What are
age
you
is
doing there in that school, Trevor? I want them screaming for the voting age to be 16, not sitting there agreeing with us.
Well, in fairness, all schools are trying to give students voices.
100%, I think so. And I think we do it particularly well in Donegal, I think, because we're very critical thinkers up here, and you can't hold us back. I wouldn't like to try and hold Roisin or Luke back. I don't think I'd get away with it. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's great. We've powerful young people here. I come across them all the time.
Yes,
you know,
and
you harness and embrace that and encourage that at the school, Trevor.
We try and encourage in all walks of life, maybe in academia or through sporting. Everybody has their place, and we're trying to find everybody's place and encourage them to embrace it and to work in it and do the best they can.
All right. So, Luke, do you want to finish your point? You say maybe that bit of maturity that comes with 18, leave it at that, but listen and find some mechanism, which there are already there, to listen to younger people.
Yes, the 18 age is good, yeah, and maybe we could like listen to some people who are younger and take their points on board.
Well, I was down at a conference, right? Not to cut across you and not listen to you. I was down at a conference in Dublin recently about the future of radio and how you guys are going to be listening to radio or whatever you might be listening to. And I looked around me and I looked up on the stage and I looked in the audience, and there wasn't a young person to be seen. You had a group of older people sort of trying to debate what might happen in terms of radio listenership for young people. You have to have that conversation with the people that you're talking about, because they will best inform you. So I agree, people have to listen to the younger people. A caller, well, it's not a caller, I think I know who it is. Wishing everyone from Carndon Community School a fantastic trip to the European Parliament from everyone at iMotors, especially Shauna, who's one of our own. Shauna,
Shauna McLaughlin is actually joining us on the trip.
Yeah, excellent. And are all passports currently accounted for?
Yes. we needed them to get it out. The students are giving them when they need it. We try to lift them when they don't need them.
I'll tell you, fair play to your team. You've got great students, don't get me wrong, but still, you have to get them here, get them around safe, and get them home safe.
I would like to thank the other members of staff who's joined us in this trip, because they've been very good. And again, we've great students
How
to work
did you
with.
join the short straw having to come in and speak to me, Trevor? How was that decided? Rock, paper, scissors?
I was trying to pass it over to numerous members of staff, and one was going, and then the researcher came back and said, just your names here, we're working with
Well,
you.
Trevor, you've done a fantastic job. Roisin, Luke, whilst you have the airwaves, anything else you want to add, or are you happy enough?
Just thank you for having us on.
No, it's our pleasure. I couldn't believe it, because I knew you were here, and I thought, wow, if, a local school and the local station here, and the fact that you were able to come in, it's brilliant.
Yeah.
So we really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having us on. it's a great opportunity to be heard, on radio.
Excellent. Well, listen, the lines are always open. Go ahead, Trevor.
Again, just like to thank Luke Flanagan for inviting us, because we wouldn't the trip probably wouldn't have been possible without him.
You know, and there are young people on that trip who will make decisions based off something like this. You know, I think it's really significant. You know, it gives people direction or whatever it might be. Some people get their inspiration from a sports star or something, but I think there's at least going to be a couple that after this trip, it's going to change a path in some way or other for them. And I think that's really powerful.
It is.
All right, Trevor McCallion, teacher at Carndonagh Community School in Donegal, and students Roisin Farn. She's also on the Donegal Youth Council as well. And we also thank Luke McLaughlin for calling in. A keen interest in politics. I think we might be hearing from the two of yous again in the future. What do you think?
Definitely.
Yeah, I think so too. Right, 086 60 25,000. That is the telephone number. We might take that last break now, and that'll give us a chance to get our next guest in. So we'll be back with our final guest of the show in the next couple of minutes. Okay, last guest of the morning is Mark Cunningham, who's involved with the GAA in Brussels. Mark, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Right, you're treasurer of the European Communities Gaelic Club in Belgium. How big is the GAA community here?
Well, it's about, there's two different clubs. There's the adult club and there's the children's club, which is European Communities Gaelic Club. There's 75 children who are members, and there's about 30, 40 members who are adults. And then the adult club has about another 50, 100 players as well, all adults. So we're two different clubs.
Yeah, and you play against each other, presumably?
Well, actually, we normally train together, and we have The Hague comes down, we have Frankfurt comes down. We've just come back from Berlin.
Yeah.
Played a tournament in Berlin this weekend. 6 different countries represented, 9 clubs playing for the FAILA qualifications in July.
That's fascinating, isn't it, really? And I imagine, too, you've got some very good players as well, people who would be plying their trade for their local club or even maybe the county, but they've moved away and they still want to be involved in the sport.
Yeah, and it's a lot of the people who are ex-players are now their children are playing. So, funny enough, the kids here have actually played in 6 different countries in Europe, including Ireland. Mm-hmm. So they've been in more countries playing Gaelic than someone I've actually visited normally.
Yeah, your family's from Mayo, Galway. You played as a child in London as well, where there's a very strong, obviously, GAA community. Was it Chiconnell Gaels, is it?
No, I played for St Brendan's, but Chiconnell Gaels, as you know, was a Donegal club.
Yeah.
My father played for the Garryowen, which was a very Galway, Clare, West Ireland club. And it was about 30 clubs when I was growing up. Huge. But you tend to align yourself with the club from where your people... So there was a club called the Kingdom, which was playing in the Kerry colours. And they were predominantly Kerry people as well.
Very good. How often do you train?
We train about once every 2 weeks, sometimes 2 out of 3, depending on the calendar.
And do you ever play at home?
Yeah, we do. We host the Benelux Cup and German Cup every year. So
your Brussels is home for you.
Brussels is home.
Did you ever play in Ireland? Sorry.
We did. We played in Ireland. We played in Niamh Oaks a few years ago. And we won, which was good.
Wow,
but
very good.
Yeah, it was great to play in Ireland, and we're going back to Germany in a few weeks for the Benelux German Club.
Lovely to speak to you, and with your background, any Donegal representation in the club?
We do, actually, because we have our chairman is a guy called Liam Breslin.
Right.
He was one of the people involved in starting the club. His family originated from Carrick and West Donegal.
Lovely, yeah.
He's now himself, he came from Mullingar, Westmeath, which he reminds us constantly about, but he is originally from Donegal.
Listen, it's been great having you in, Mark. Sorry it was brief, but I just wanted to recognise what's going on here. Is there anything else you want to add just before we wrap up?
No, I'd just like to say thank you. And I'd also like to thank our sponsors, Eurocity, who is an Irish guy called Sean McMahon who sponsors us, and also to Sean Kelly, who's been very supportive over the last few years to us when we've been looking for a promotion.
Fantastic.
As a good GAA man, as you probably know.
Yeah, of course. Listen, brilliant. I know he gave us a wee dig on his way out about the trials and tribulations in Donegal, but it was all in good spirits. Listen, thank you very much, Mark. That's where we have to leave it on the programme today for this European special live from Brussels. I want to thank Caroline Orr, who researched and produced, Donna Marie and Anya working back at base, and Kevin working on the tech side of things here. To all of our guests and to the local tech team here in Brussels who've worked wonderfully with us and kept us on the air, we really do appreciate it. But that is where we have to leave it. Don't forget that Donald Kavanagh will be presenting the show tomorrow from 9, and I'll be back with you on Friday morning from our Letterkenny studio at 9. But for me, Greg Hughes, and all of the team, have a wonderful Wednesday and chat to you soon.